בחרמון נמס השלג בחצי הלילה, בחרמון זורם לו פלג בחצי הליל, אבא שם על הר השלג בחצי הלילה, שר שירים על נס בפלא עם כל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. בבקעת תמר פורח בחצי הלילה, הירח שם זורח בחצי הליל, שם אחי ודאי שומע בחצי הלילה את שירנו השמח כאן בישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. במדבר הולך החושך בחצי הלילה, שקט הס בארץ גושן בחצי הליל, לדודי עיני נחושת בחצי הלילה, וגם הוא חוגג כמו שכל בית ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. ואני יושב בבית בחצי הלילה, עם נרות וגביע יין בחצי הליל, וכוכב מאיר עיניים בחצי הלילה, לי מוסר ברכת שמיים ולכל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. שוב צוהל.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Future sons of
Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1001 of the news. And today we have very big news that the British-made Storm Shadow missiles were used on Russia for the first time ever, right after the attack were used. And also, there are rumors floating around about a major attack, which may be coming up on Kyiv here in the next couple of days. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, and particularly inside of the war of Ukraine today, as we were able to hear that Ukrainian air forces have successfully launched a British-based Storm Shadow missile attack against the Russian command post into the area just outside the town of Marino, a small suburb of the larger village of Ivanovsko, which is incredibly hard to pronounce, but it is on the E38 highway heading towards Rilisk. We were also able to hear that the Russian Federation is apparently making a response currently to the American and British used missiles at the Grau arsenal yesterday at Kharkiv, and the British missiles used today around the area of Marino, and apparently are beginning a supposed attempt to prepare an R-26 intercontinental ballistic missile armed with a conventional warhead to fire on the city of Kyiv. We have been able to get a lot more information on this, and right now the stories on that are conflicting. Nevertheless, considering that it is dominating the headlines today and a lot of people around the world are talking about this very instance, we are going to be talking about every single piece of information that we've been able to get on the topic and whether this is something that will happen or will not happen. Nevertheless, it is something that has been making the rounds today and has been heavily believed, as we've actually been hearing that may have been the reason why the U.S. Embassy closed. But nevertheless, at the exact same time, we've also been able to hear that the Ukrainian government has been putting out statements saying that anything suggesting that the Russians are going to be conducting an overwhelming air attack to the point that the entire city of Kyiv will be overwhelmed is completely false and untrue. Although, according to the United States Embassy statement yesterday, they have been notified by the Ukrainian intelligence that a major air attack was going to be happening, and for that reason, reasons shut down over the past 24 hours. However, it seems as though things are not that clear-cut even in this instance, as today, Danish special forces of the Danish Navy were able to board and seize the Chinese vessel Yiping, which was currently sailing through the area of the Denmark Strait and out into the open sea just outside of Denmark. The Danish authorities were able to seize the vessel, and upon seizing the vessel and arresting most of the crew members on board, they have been able to find out that the identities of every single person on board the vessel was undoubtedly that of Russian citizens. And it appears that
you don't say. Russians on a Chinese vessel tearing up undersea cables? It can't be.
It cannot be. It is the most epic crossover of the century, but we will be getting into the details on that one a little bit later on tonight. We have also been able to hear some very interesting news from inside of the areas of Russia itself, as not only were the Storm Shadow strikes the only ones that happened today near Marino and the Kursk Oblast, but we were also able to hear of additional strikes happening at Gubkin in the Belgrade Oblast, and also once again in Voronezh, as we've seen that the Ukrainians have been hammering the Russian strategic abilities, at least over the past few days, really the past 48 hours, as heavily as physically possible, in an attempt to try and drive the Russian armed forces into really a supply situation of desperation, to explain it in the best case scenario, at least for what the Ukrainians are looking for at the moment. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear some very interesting news of something that happened about a year and a half ago at this point. Many people will remember the Wagner coup, the coup of legend, a coup that is truly worth telling the story over and over again, as it was one of the most important and most defining elements in Russian internal politics over the course of the entire conflict. And today, somehow, some way, we're not really sure how this came out, but a phone call has emerged that happened in between Yevgeny Prigozhin and Lukashenko that gives us a much better look at what was going on behind the scenes, and also shows us that the Belarusians were a lot more involved in the coup than we originally anticipated at all. We also were able to hear heavy frontline fighting was occurring in almost all fronts once again today, as the Russian Federation is still throwing the kitchen sink at the Ukrainians and attempting to make a frontline breakthrough in at least some area to claim some form of victory before peace negotiations may be coming around. We are also hearing that the Ukrainians are still holding the Russians largely at bay, inflicting incredibly large losses on the Russian Federation's armed forces, but at the same time, though, it appears that Zelensky is saying that Crimea can no longer be retaken through force of arms of the Ukrainian nation, and it appears that they will have to try and get Crimea back through some sort of a diplomatic channel. However, diplomatic channels are also a little interesting as well, and while we haven't put this down as news today on our map, we have heard from multiple statements, including from the Office of the President of the United States, that the approval for long-range deep strikes using American weapons into the Russian Federation and the provision of anti-personnel mines to the state of Ukraine to use on the active front lines is actually in conjunction and in cooperation with the incoming president-elect's decisions to further ramp up the conflict to see if there can be a good negotiating position through strength to come in the near future. We have been getting loads and loads of detail and information on what's been going on over the past 24 hours alone, and the news is exceptionally large. And moving on...
Isn't it kind of crazy how the news is getting even more wild? And I thought the news was going to slow down just a bit, because we're going into the winter months here when the fighting was expected to slow down just a little bit, but yet the news keeps growing literally every single day. Like, we've been swamped with the amount of research and news we've been covering over the last couple of days, and it looks like it's just getting more and more heated every single day. So that was the total opposite of what I was thinking.
It really is the total opposite. It's actually starting to ramp up in intensity, and also the amount of news that's coming out just in the Ukraine war alone. And we also do have a small glimpse into the Israeli conflict that's currently ongoing in southern Lebanon at the moment, as the Israelis have finally published a little bit more of additional footage showing what their ground forces are doing in that area at the moment. But nevertheless, the news is getting insane inside of Ukraine, and so we are going to be moving y'all into it immediately, and especially into the major news that happened today, as we were able to hear that the Ukrainian government did confirm that they had fired off Storm Shadow missiles into the Russian Federation for the first time ever. Storm Shadows aren't necessarily new. They've actually been inside of Ukrainian hands for just about 2 years at this point, but Storm Shadows have never been used outside of the Ukrainian territory, or at least internationally claimed Ukrainian territory since 1991. So the only areas that we've ever seen the Storm Shadow used in up to this point were inside of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea. It appears that they were completely barred from striking the Kerch Bridge, because we've never seen a Storm Shadow or Scalp EG fired at the Kerch Bridge, so that appears to have been a target that was off the list. But nevertheless, we have never, and I want to make that incredibly clear, seen a British or French missile fired onto Russian soil in the entirety of the war, or for that matter, in the entirety of the Russian Federation's history since 1991. That has all changed today with the confirmation that the Ukrainians made that they had fired off their missiles into the Russian Federation that were provided by the United Kingdom specifically, as they only mentioned the Storm Shadow. However, a few minutes after those missiles were fired, they made their way into a very obscure location, one that you wouldn't really expect, and it's not that deep into the Russian Federation. It's only, and let me make sure to measure this, 30 miles deep inside of Russia. Technically, this target that they hit today could have easily been hit with a GMLRS fired from a HIMARS, or it could have easily also been hit by American-provided frontline artillery that would be inside of the Kursk region at the moment. All of that wouldn't have been out of the question. As a matter of fact, the Ukrainians actually could have hit this exact location in Marino with a heavy artillery piece such as a 2S7 Peon, or maybe even an Uragan, which easily would have been able to reach the distance to Marino and start striking this location. For some reason, they didn't, and they decided to use the Storm Shadow missiles instead. Now, it's very interesting what we're going to see here in these clips that I have to show y'all, but we are able to see the Storm Shadow impacts from the drone footage that was being taken by a Ukrainian drone, making sure that the Storm Shadows were impacting the proper location. Now, really quickly, I do want to make sure to get a geolocation for all of y'all so that we all know exactly where these were striking. There is a very prominent building within the town of Marino. It's largely a local landmark, is the best way to put it. It's some sort of a sanatorium of a sort, and let me see if I can get onto a street view here and try and show y'all this. It is this building right here. It's some kind of a sanatorium of a sort or something like that. It's a historical building, however, these days, but it is a prominent landmark and a feature of the city. And in this clip, you can actually see it right down there. The drone camera is pretty much looking at it. But the Storm Shadows did not target or destroy this building. They actually targeted something just off to the east, somewhere within this compound of buildings just to the east of the old sanatorium. We don't know what was actually in these buildings. The Ukrainian government has not come out and made a statement yet about what exactly was in them, but we have a pretty good guess at the moment what it most likely was. Considering its geographical location compared to the active front line just south of Koronivo at the moment, and also considering that it is in a largely obscure area, but it is still close to a larger highway, and also due to the fact that there's no larger buildings here that could be used to supply the Russian army with materials, we are believing that this most likely was a command post that was being operated by one of the Russian brigades in the area of Kursk that was coordinating the frontline efforts somewhere near the Koronivo direction. That is all entirely analysis on our end, and we have not been able to get any clear statements yet to clarify exactly what the target was, but at the moment we are believing, just based off of reasonable deduction, that it has to be some sort of a command post that the Ukrainians were hitting. And hit it they did. I'm going to count all of the hits that we're going to see on this clip here really quickly while we're watching it. So the clip starts, and the Ukrainian drone observes the first Storm Shadow hit on the first building. This one appears to have been in the clearing right down here, which it looks like some sort of a longer shed, and it appears that that was the first impact recorded was on that long shed, somewhere down the eastern side, or the right side, at least relative to what we're looking at on Google Maps, of the building. That was the first hit. The Ukrainian drone continues to record as we wait for the second hit. The second hit is going to hit in a completely different area and actually hit a completely different building, probably the farthest one off to the right and actually the closest one to the actual sanatorium itself. The explosion was right off the wing of the sanatorium and appears to have hit one of these two buildings that is just east of the old sanatorium compound that is still maintained and operated by the Russian Federation's government. This is giving us an idea that this entire series of buildings just to the east of the old sanatorium were being used as some sort of a command post. It wouldn't make sense to use this as a logistics hub, as there isn't really any major roadworks that would support that kind of traffic, and these buildings also do not have open floor plans, from what we understand, to host a large amount of supplies. Usually the Russians like to go with an open floor plan style building, and we've seen that as a clear precedent over the past 3 years of war. So we do believe, once again, that all of these buildings were a part of a larger command compound that was being used by the Russian Federation. And once again...
Also, Enforcer, I am seeing here, according to all the other reporting as well, that apparently the sanatorium sanatorium is under the control of the Russian presidential administration, and it looks like maybe underneath the sanatorium there may be a communications hub down there, which the Russian military is currently using. And they say here that apparently it's not a regular communications facility, but an underground command post. It also mentioned that the part you just showed right there where they actually targeted, that is a part of the sanatorium's estate, but this is no longer a sanatorium based on what I'm reading here. This is indeed controlled by the Russian presidential administration for probably military purposes. And also, it says here that maybe Putin has visited it before, so it seems like it could be very much active right now.
Very interesting here, and it does seem as though the original analysis was largely on point. It sounds as though it's some sort of a command post at the moment. And then we saw, after the second Storm Shadow strike over here towards the actual old sanatorium, that in a second there's going to be a third strike. This third strike once again hit on the long building to the southern side of the eastern part of the sanatorium's estate, this time more towards the central area of the building. That is the third Storm Shadow to hit on film. Well, you see smoke is starting to rise out of this building, possibly suggesting that a fire has now started inside of it due to the two very frequent explosions that have now hit the facility. And for a moment, there's a little bit of a stillness that passes over the area. It looks like the attack may be over. But you would be lulled into a sense of security if you thought that was the case, because they didn't land 3 Storm Shadows onto this facility. There was a fourth that then hit somewhere on one of the buildings right around here. One of these buildings was hit. We couldn't really tell really easily on that clip because it was really kind of hidden in the forest, but one of these buildings has now also been hit as well, along with the one closest to the sanatorium and the long building to the southern side of the estate.
You know something, Enforcer? I wonder, because obviously the Storm Shadow is a very valuable weapon that Ukraine doesn't have a whole bunch of, so whatever they're hitting here must be extremely valuable of a target. I wonder, since this was allegedly a command post or a really valuable communications hub underneath the sanatorium and also with the surrounding buildings, I wonder if Ukraine got really good intelligence that maybe some North Korean general or some other high-profile military target might have also been in these buildings when it was struck, because it seems to me like sending in this many Storm Shadows to this one spot like that, they had some really good intel that somebody or something was here of great value.
I believe that may be the case. And also, another interesting thing, watch this. This is the most interesting part of the clip. I just talked about one of those buildings in the compound just got hit once. It's now gotten hit twice instantly. And not only was hit twice, in a second it's about to get hit for the third time. And once again, a reminder, there's the long building. My mouse is moving over it right now, if y'all can see it on screen. There's the long building to the south. There is the building right over here, just east of the actual old sanatorium. And then this building has now been hit twice. And looking at it now, seeing that we have a much clearer view, we can see the long building right here in view. So it appears that this building right here is the one that's being hit right now by the Storm Shadows. The one that's pretty much dead center of this forested compound east of the old sanatorium. And it's now been hit twice. The long building to the south got hit twice. The one closest to the sanatorium got hit once. The one in the center has now been hit a third time and a fourth time.
You know, I guess when the North Koreans and the Russian generals get smoked, they can simply go right upstairs to the sanatorium and go nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they got hit a fifth time.
Just right up one staircase, you'll be good. Like, not too far, just right up the stairs.
Dude, and like these guys in this building, whatever was in there, because they've now hit it with 5 Storm Shadows. Almost one after the other. They're coming in with almost no delay. You know they have to feel like if they're even around at that point, they're going crazy because they're like, I swear that's like the 5th one that's hit this building. And that was the 5th one right there that we just saw explode onto the building. There will then, here in a second, it's going to blow you all away. Y'all think that 5 is enough, right? No, you're wrong, you're mistaken. They're actually going to land another one onto that building here in a second. Any second now, the drone camera's getting a little bit flaky here, but we could see more smoke rising from another impact right there that hit that central building. And there it is again, the 6th strike of a Storm Shadow onto the central building in the compound. We have no idea what was in that building. And there's the 7th hit on the same building. We don't know what was in it, but the Ukrainians have fired around $3 million missiles apiece at this one building. We do not know what was in it, but apparently was of high military value.
Yeah, it's also crazy to like send that many Storm Shadows in because, like you said, they're almost $2.5 million USD a piece, which is definitely not a cheap system. But also, do we know how many Storm Shadows that Ukraine has in total? I think I've heard reports that maybe they have around 50 or so, and that's sort of on the high end estimate. So, do we know for a fact how many they have?
We don't really know for certain, at least at the moment, because we don't know how many of them have been fired, how many of them may have ended up being duds, which is always a possibility, even though it's a lot less of a possibility with a Western weaponry for there to be duds. There's still a chance that they could have fired one and then it was a dud and they just didn't report that because they don't want to talk about it. So we don't really know the exact number. But still, the fact that they fired, I believe, if my count was correct, around 10 Storm Shadows at this facility, that is a large amount of the Storm Shadows that they probably have been provided up to this point. They may have been saving them up for when they could fire them into Russia. We're not entirely sure, but still, the damage here was significant, and it appears to have had a very concerted purpose. We haven't heard the Russian Federation make any specific statements about the damage caused to this facility, which is also another very interesting thing to kind of talk about here. The Russians have been dead silent on this facility getting hit massively by the Storm Shadows. The only thing that they have talked about is the actual use of British weaponry, but they have never talked at all about the actual damage that was caused to the facility itself. And we were also able to get footage from the ground, letting us hear the explosions from the distance as well, and confirming not only by the drone footage in the air just to the northeast of the town, but also on the ground just to the west of the sanatorium, that the explosions were hitting those facilities just east of the old sanatorium building.
Я в машине сидел, выбежал.
We hear the first one coming in.
What, блядь?
And here comes another.
Взрывают сейчас. Вон там дым идет.
We can hear the slide whistle now.
Еще они там забомбили. Еще один прилет летит.
And here comes another. And we see the smoke rising and the sound of metal falling everywhere.
What?
This guy
Что это
Scoot.
взрывы, а? Серег, хрен его знает, мы, наверное, сейчас ломаем.
Man, also, I like how this guy's first thought isn't, oh my god, my beautiful Russia being attacked. Dude, he's like, bro, the property values are dropping, Sergey. We gotta move. Like, that's his first thought, man.
Man, his first thought is literally like, let's don't stay and defend the place. Let's like get in the cars and like, you know, head out like as far away as we can.
Dude, bro, this guy's gonna back up and move. That's the first thing he thought about.
Рванемся отсюда. Ой, бля. Пиздец, хрен знает, я здесь сейчас, бля. Ой, бля, пиздец.
Dang.
Better wake up Sergey. Nobody's getting the AA.
Ой, бля,
Yeah. Wake Sergey up. Go get him on the anti-air gun.
Прямо по Марину.
He almost got ran over right there.
Running right there. They're taking off.
Не знаю, бля. Хуй знает, где сейчас пацаны там.
He doesn't know where the boys are. He just wants to drink a beer with them, is all, you know?
Нахрен сюда. Вот это взрывы. Именно Марина наша взрывает, бля. Именно. Ебать, нахрен сюда. Пиздец, Серега.
And there's another explosion right there.
Бля, нам надо ломиться оттуда.
We have to
Серега, бля.
move, Sergey, he claims.
Я хрен его
I don't
знает.
even effing know. It's just like, I would guess not, man.
Прям по
He's
нас.
talking to
Здесь на
himself.
нашей
There's nobody
территории.
with him.
I guess I don't know what he's doing, man. Honestly, he may be delusional, but whoever his
Thinking about the
imaginary friend,
sanatorium for real.
dude, he literally just crawled right out of the sanatorium. He's talking to his imaginary friend. He's like, Sergey, we might have to move the property values, bled. They're dropping around here, bled. It's like, bro, no shit. Like, the property's gone. Like, they're blowing it up, like, down the street.
Взрывает там, хрен его знает. Вояки он здесь, бля. Именно что сюда стреляет, бля.
I don't even know what the
Хрен
guy's
его
saying.
знает, что за прилеты, бля, это были. Везде он.
Yeah, I think this guy might have been impatient.
Yeah. He's one of the old
Ебать,
ghouls of the
нахуй.
sanatorium, you know.
Серега, здесь что-то, бля, нездоровая канитель, бля.
There's something crazy going on here, Sergey, he claims. I would suppose
Не
so.
знаю, где там бомбили, но прям на территории хреначили там, ближе к охране. Так что как-то так, Серега, хрен его знает, бля.
He's literally talking to himself. That is wild.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know what to make of that. And he sees where the smoke's coming from, but then he claimed that he doesn't even know where they're hitting. It's like, well, they're hitting where the smoke's coming from, I would assume. But nevertheless, it does seem as though the Storm Shadow was certainly used. The Ukrainians confirmed that. Everyone's confirmed that. And then the Russians started putting out pictures of the debris that they were able to recover. And some of the parts clearly were labeled as Storm Shadow parts. And we can also see them holding some fragments of the Storm Shadows here. A gift from Ukraine, from also along with Britain, with love. The rest of the pictures aren't loading, but that's fine because y'all get the idea. Nevertheless, it does seem as though the Russian Federation is getting pounded pretty badly by Western weaponry, and that's something shocking, because from what we've been told, and also I just saw this today, folks, I actually wanted to share this with y'all because this was news to me. Apparently, U.S. News and EurasiaNews.com has stated that the Russian Federation is now the strongest army in the world, which I found very shocking, and I thought that that must have been a very true statement coming from such reputable publications such as those. But nevertheless, it appears that the strongest army in the world is just no match for those simple, archaic Western weapons like the ATACMS and the Storm Shadow. From what we saw, 10 Storm Shadows, and we're assuming that the Ukrainians only fired 10, made it through the Russian airspace from the border and into the area of Marino, and then slammed into its target time and time again without any air defense being activated to stop them. The same thing happened at Gral, and we understand that maybe the Russians shot down 1 ATACMS out of the 6 that were fired at that facility, but once again, pretty much all of them made it through, and there really wasn't any sizable air defense activity that was conducted in the defense of the Russian arsenal at Kharkiv. This is giving us a very strong idea that the Russian Federation is now going to be put severely on the back foot by the allowance of Western weapons to be fired into the Russian Federation. And a lot of people are wondering, well, why'd they do that? Or why in the world would anyone allow that? And interesting enough, it seems as though this is a joint escalation, or at least on the West side, by the current administration and the incoming presidential administration of the United States, as the incoming presidential administration, at least according to what we were told by the office of the president today, spoke on a phone call and actually voiced interest in moving forward with this plan and creating a form of a continuum in between the current administration's planning with the Ukraine war and the incoming administration's planning of the Ukraine war. It's supposedly some sort of an attempt to create a negotiating platform of peace through strength, and showing that the Russian Federation will easily be overwhelmed by Western firepower and weaponry that's provided to Ukraine, as pretty much all the stops are going to be pulled out to allow the Ukrainians to do what they need to be able to get in the strongest negotiating position possible. At least that's what's being presented publicly at the moment. And that also is falling in line with the provision of anti-personnel mines that are also going to be provided to Ukraine in large numbers. Once again, it appears to be a joint collaboration in between the current presidential administration and the incoming one. We are also understanding that there is a little bit of a interesting kind of a question here, at least with the British Storm Shadows being used today, because Ukraine did fire those into mainland Russia. We are assuming that they slammed them into a command post, pretty much annihilating it and most of the people inside of it. And a lot of people are wondering, is Ukraine moving too fast, or do they need to move even quicker? And it seems as though a lot of people are actually believing that the Ukrainians need to speed it up a little. We need to get this thing to work. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think the Ukrainians really need to ramp things up, or do you think they need to slow them down a little bit?
All right, so literally right after the Ukraine got permission to launch the Storm Shadows and the ATACMS, they literally started launching them the minute they got the permission, basically a few hours after. So they really got to work really quickly. But the question is Ukraine moving too fast by launching so many strikes this rapidly and this fast? So about 59% said no, Ukraine does need to move more quickly, while 17% said yes, Ukraine should slow down a bit, and 17% said I don't think it matters. And on this one, I would say, considering the fact that it appears that Ukraine is doing the same strategy that Russia is trying to do right now, which is rush to expel Russians from territory to go into negotiations with a stronger perspective, I guess you could say, so that way they have some advantage in negotiations. It looks like they do need to move very quickly right now. And I know some people out there are going to say, well, shouldn't they hold back some of their missiles in case the war doesn't end? They don't want to find themselves in a complete weapon shortage. Like, for example, if they only have about 50 Storm Shadow missiles and Ukraine just used about 6 to 10 of them on this one attack right here, they've already used up at least 1/5 of their total supply of Storm Shadow missiles, which could cause a deficit with their missile supplies going into the future if the war drags on for another year or two. So I would say that the benefit of moving fast right now to get that advantage in negotiations probably outweighs the risk of running out of weapons later on down the road, because I think the objective right now is to bring the war to an end as quick as possible, force Russia to make really strong concessions, get their troops out of Ukraine, and that is the overall goal. Now, whether or not that happens is another story, but that is the goal, and that's what they should be working towards. So I'm with the 60%. I think they should move more quickly and to do what they're doing right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they should move quickly, because the best battle plans are the ones that are well carved up and then pushed forward with extreme prejudice and violence, which is always the answer to pretty much anything in an armed conflict. The Ukrainians have to be able to operate with speed. The Russians really cannot have any time to react to any Ukrainian actions at all to be able to make sure that the Ukrainians are able to overwhelm the Russians and put them on the back foot for a large amount. Also, really quickly, Matthew, we have a very interesting bot in here that was trying to spell out an interesting word right there. That was very interesting, without a doubt, but nevertheless, I do believe that the Ukrainians do need to move as quickly as possible. I would actually say that they are moving fairly quickly at this point, but I also would have to say that I don't believe that they're using the ATACMS and the Storm Shadow to their full capabilities. There are easily weapons that have been provided that could have easily reached out to a place like Karachev, only 86 miles inside the Bryansk Oblast, and into the area of Marino, which is only around maybe 20 or so miles inside of the Russian Federation's territory. Many other weapons could have easily hit those facilities and caused a decent amount of damage as well. I believe that the Ukrainians are just trying to test the waters at this moment to see what the Russian reaction would really look like, at least for now, and then they're going to start going all in and start striking targets that are far deeper inside the Russian Federation than just a couple of dozen miles beyond the border. That's what I would largely believe at this moment, because it doesn't seem as though the Ukrainians are really using these weapons to their potential. So with that in mind, I would generally have to say I would have to be with the 60% as well. But moving on from that, and it's time for us to get on into the big news of the night, the ICBM story. Now, I do have to make sure to tell you all this. I'm going to be saying it's the story, because a lot of information has come out about this since we made our video today, where the story looked very clear, that is starting to make the story a lot more confusing and a lot more complicated. So we're still going to cover it, but we're going to tell you everything that we have so far. There was a major event that happened last night, as many of y'all know, where the United States Embassy put out a statement stating that they were going to be closed tomorrow, which was today. And the U.S. Embassy, along with many other embassies, has been closed today. And some countries, including Kyrgyzstan, have ordered their citizens to leave Ukraine immediately. All of this was done, according to what we were hearing from the U.S. Embassy and others, because they had been told by the Ukrainian intelligence of some sort of a significant and overwhelming air attack that was going to be occurring on the city of Kyiv over this day. It has not happened so far, and actually in Ukraine right now, it's the break of dawn on the next day, the 21st of November, instead of the 20th, which was the day that the embassy was closed. This is giving us an understanding that apparently there is something a little bit interesting going on, because we have been hearing rumors today, and these are rumors that have been apparently strongly founded, at least according to information that we have, because everyone was publishing these stories today, that Russia was going to be launching a Rubesh SSM, which is an intercontinental ballistic missile, technically the R-26, from a Topol-M intercontinental ballistic missile launcher with a conventional warhead towards the city of Kyiv. That's at least the information that we were told at the earlier part of the day, and it looked like everyone was taking that information and running with it. And so we also took it and ran with it as well, because it appeared that it was credible enough that quite literally anyone and everyone was going to be talking about it. And so we also talked about it as well, but even in my short war video, if y'all watched that today, I threw up a whole bunch of issues with this story that just are not making any sense. And I don't really know if that's because the Russians are illogical or if the story isn't really an entirely accurate one. The Russian Federation, using one of their R-26 intercontinental ballistic missiles, one of their most advanced and expensive missiles, and one that's in fairly limited numbers, to launch a conventional warhead towards the city of Kyiv, a city that is only a couple of hundred miles away from the Russian border, doesn't make any sense at all from any level. Using an intercontinental ballistic missile to deliver a conventional warhead has never been done in history. The fact of the matter is that an intercontinental ballistic missile has never been fired in combat in history. This would be the first time ever. Not only that, these things are wildly expensive to maintain, and they're also wildly expensive to produce in the first place, meaning that it wouldn't make a lot of economic sense to fire an intercontinental ballistic missile at something that is honestly within the range of an intermediate range ballistic missile, which is far more affordable reliable and cheaper to operate. Another thing that is a little bit weird about this story is that the fact that the Russians would launch a conventional warhead on an ICBM that is capable of a MIRV reentry is a little bit weird, because it's like, does that suggest that they're going to fire multiple conventional warheads on the single missile, or does this mean that they're only going to be firing a unitary warhead on the single missile? It doesn't make any sense. Like, the story is not really adding up that much to me. It could be because the Russians are truly illogical, or it may actually be that the story is being fabricated by Russian intelligence agencies, which is what the Ukrainians are starting to claim later on today, and that's why the story's become a lot more murky.
And also, what's even worse is that the Ukrainians won't even know until the moment the thing's launched and actually impacts something what type of warhead was even on the thing. Because I don't think there's any way for Ukraine to know what the Russians are launching with it on the payload. It could be a nuclear payload. It could be non-nuclear. It could be a MRIV. They don't know until it hits. And that's the really dangerous thing about the ICBM, is nobody will know until the very last minute when it's too late.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, no one would really know, and honestly, it wouldn't matter, because we can only react after a nuke has exploded on Ukrainian territory. That's really the only time the United States could react, because beyond that, we would be doing something preemptive, and our doctrine is defensive. Even on the United States' own borders, we would have to know that an actual nuclear warhead's being fired. But generally, if an ICBM's being fired, you generally assume it has a nuclear warhead on board, because, once again, to remind everyone of this, never in history has an ICBM not really been mounted with a nuclear warhead. Now, it's easy to convert the nuclear warhead, literally just remove it and place in a conventional warhead, but no one ever does that, because it doesn't make any economical sense for the cost of the missile to just fire off your standard conventional weaponry. It makes no sense. It only makes economical sense in an actual practical usage of the weapon system to use a nuclear warhead with the ICBM. That's generally why you never see them being used with conventional warheads, because it literally makes no sense. But beyond that, well, no, economical sense, that is. It can make sense in other metrics, maybe strategically or as some form of a warning, but beyond that, it doesn't make any sense on an economical scale of what the weapon cost versus what you're doing with it at that point. So with that in mind, we really do not know at this moment where the story is going, because I also want to put this out there that the Ukrainian government has been claiming today that all statements that the Russians are going to launch some sort of a massive weapon or a massive attack on Kyiv is entirely untrue, and they never said anything like it, which I also have to say is a very weird thing, because the U.S. Embassy doesn't close because it sees a mean tweet saying that Russia's going to launch an ICBM. The U.S. Embassy said that they had been contacted by Ukrainian intelligence services and told about this instance. That means that either the Russians were able to disguise themselves as Ukrainian intelligence services and pretty much get every major nation's embassy to close inside of Kyiv for a day, or the Ukrainian intelligence agencies actually acted on this information, told these embassies to close, and now they're backing off of the story. The story is honestly so confusing at this point. We really do not know what direction it's heading, and we don't know if the stories are credible or if they're not credible, because literally anyone and everyone's coming out and making contradictory statements, and most of it does not make any sense at this point. So that is why we were telling you.
Also, if the ICBM was launched from Russia, with that being so close to Ukraine, would the thing even be able to get up to its maximum altitude? Like, how high would it actually be? Because would Ukraine have the possibility of shooting the thing down before it hit their territory, or would it be completely out of the question to shoot it down?
I don't really think they would have the ability to shoot it down. I don't think the Patriot is that good at conducting exo-atmospheric interceptions, and I honestly do not know what the flight path of an ICBM being launched at such a short range would look like, unless if they fired this ICBM maybe all the way from the other side of Russia, and then just allowed it to arc over Russia and back down into Ukraine. But at that point, though, Ukraine's nowhere close to the apogee of its flight. It's pretty much going to be on the receiving end, no matter what, of the return, the re-entry into the atmosphere, which means that the actual warhead would be going at least over Mach 10 at that point, almost all the way up to the point of impact, meaning that intercepting it and destroying it before it hit would largely be impossible at that point. So I would generally have to say, I don't really think the Ukrainians can actually intercept this thing if it is fired, and if it handles or operates just like a nuclear warhead, but as a conventional warhead, I don't really think there's a good way for them to intercept that with a great chance of success. It would be largely, quite literally, shooting against the odds at that point.
Yeah, the whole idea of really shooting an ICBM from Russia at Ukraine in itself is just insane. Like, forget the fact, like, we know what Russia's trying to do here. They're trying to intimidate Ukraine, and also, if they actually launch the thing, they're trying to send a very strong message that they are willing to go above and beyond to make sure they can win the war no matter what. They're willing to go to the depths of hell and back to actually make sure that they're not going to lose the war. So, the idea that they would fire an intercontinental ballistic missile at Kyiv, even the idea of that being floated around a little bit, is insane because the thing is meant to go around the world. It's not meant to be like shot as a medium range missile like that, like right across the border of Russia into Ukraine. So, like you're saying, unless they're planning on shooting it from the other end of Russia, then I'm not really sure how that even work in practicality.
If they shot it from somewhere around Vladivostok and it flew in an arc just over the Russian Federation, that would be a distance of about 4.5 thousand miles. So that would be within the effective range of an ICBM and something that could easily be done. But if we ever see an ICBM launch, it's not going to be fired from Western Russia. It's going to be fired from Eastern Russia, traveling over the entirety of Russia to Ukraine, because there simply isn't really a way for an ICBM to be launched at such a short range from a place like Moscow, let's just say as a relative point of reference, to Kyiv. That's only about a 400-mile distance, and there's no way in hell that an ICBM could be launched, conduct its apogee, and then return in a re-entry at that kind of a distance. There's really just no way for that to be done. So, in my opinion, I would have to say I don't really know how credible the story is. I mean, it's possible that they could do something like that, but still, a lot of people are having a lot of questions about the story in the first place at all. And reports are claiming that Russia is considering the launch of an R-26 ICBM at Ukraine in the coming days. And that's not just something that we're seeing on this channel. Quite literally, everyone's been talking about that today. And then the Ukrainians apparently said something about it to the U.S. Embassy and multiple other embassies overnight, and then are now publicly backing off of those statements and saying that no such statements were made, and in fact the Russians said them, although the US embassy isn't going to be working off of just some random tweets and then going, let's shut down the embassy. That just doesn't work that way ever. But still, a lot of people are putting in their opinions on this and what they're thinking about this. Some people are saying that Russia might use a nuclear warhead. Some people are saying that Russia probably will not use an ICBM on Kyiv in any means, whether it be conventional or ballistic. Well, not conventional or ballistic, conventional or nuclear. And a decent amount of people are believing that the Russians will fire an ICBM at Kyiv, but it will only use a non-nuclear conventional warhead. A lot of people are putting in their opinions on this at the moment. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this story at the moment, and what are you thinking as well?
All right, so about 51% of the audience said Russia might use the non-nuclear warhead on the ICBM missile if they launched it, while 24% said Russia will never use an ICBM on Kyiv whatsoever in any way, shape, or form, and 16% said Russia might use a nuclear warhead to make their point extremely clear. And honestly, I'm still holding to my previous statements. I don't think Russia will use nuclear weapons unless NATO troops entered on the ground inside of Ukraine. I think that's really the only realistic scenario that we would actually see Russia use a nuke. And even then, like I've said, it's not a guarantee. So if Russia decided to launch the ICBM, first of all, I wouldn't rule it out. Like the story that's being floated around, it sounds like it could have some credibility to it. I'm not saying it's likely, like don't quote me on it, but it sounds like it is actually being considered by the Russians. So we can't rule it out completely. If they were to launch it though, I would say they would most likely, very strongly, use a non-nuclear warhead of some sort, because the objective behind launching the thing is simply to scare Ukraine into compliance and hope that they will back down, going to the negotiating table sometime in January or February of next year. So I'm with the 51%, and I don't think personally that we can rule the option out, because I see a lot of people saying, it sounds like just total fear-mongering and really no substance to it. I would initially have thought that as well, but based on what we're seeing, it looks like it might have a little shred of credibility to it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, to be entirely honest, I'm really with the 25%. I just don't think that they're going to fire an ICBM at Kyiv. They have easily, I mean, really, like when we think about it, the Kinzhal and the Zircon hypersonic missiles are technically nuclear capable. And what's interesting about that is that they've been firing those into Ukraine a great deal, and nothing's really changed because of that. I mean, they could easily nuke Ukraine at this moment if they wanted to. They're already using weaponry. Hell, even just a conventional Iskander is nuclear capable, and they keep using these weapons against Ukraine, and it really means nothing. So firing an ICBM at them is not only an expensive waste, honestly, just to deliver a conventional warhead, but it also just doesn't make any economical sense, like at all. And so in my opinion, I just don't really think this thing is going to happen. I just don't know where the story is coming from. I mean, people are running with it like it is true, but in my honest opinion, I'm not really seeing the credit in the story. Like, even earlier today when we had nothing to contradict this story and I was reporting it at face value, even then, if y'all go back and watch the video, I wasn't really a big believer in the story being entirely true because it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you just look at it on its face. And for that reason, I just find it really hard to believe that this is something that would be done. I could be wrong, though, and I will be open to being wrong here in the future, but still, something about it just doesn't rub me right. It just sounds like a story that's a little bit fanciful, at least in my opinion. Like, if they're going to do anything, I mean, maybe they'll start firing more Zircons and Kinzels into Ukraine and, start emphasizing that they're nuclear capable, which they've already done before. But beyond that, I just don't know what they would do, really, to be entirely honest. Firing an ICBM just doesn't make any sense. And so, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And let's see here. And A.F. Kaplan said, it's not about psychological war. It's not about economics. It's about psychological warfare, bullying, and intimidation. But they've kind of already done that before. And I see where you're coming from with that. But they've done that with the Kinzel and the Zircon, which are both nuclear capable. Those hypersonic missiles are not made to be fired with a conventional warhead. They are made as a nuclear weapon, one that would be too fast for Western air defense systems to technically be able to intercept. At least that was what's advertised on the 10. And they were easily intercepted from what we can tell. Some of them do make it through, but most of them are intercepted. But at the same time, the whole point of the Russians using those in Ukraine was to say, oh, look, we're nuclear capable, and we could easily nuke Ukraine and start a nuclear war over this whole thing. And then everyone just kind of forgot about that and just have ignored it from this point on. Like, we watch sometimes in the air defense reports that Zircons and Kinzels were shot down, and it means quite literally nothing because it's just like any other threat that the Russians have made. It just turned into background noise. And this seems to me to maybe be an extension of that, but it just doesn't make any sense, because if they were wanting to bully and intimidate and put fear into people, the hypersonic missiles, at least in the modern day mindset, are far scarier than an ICBM ever would be. Because with an ICBM, a lot of people believe that it's easy to intercept them. A lot of people believe that a hypersonic is impossible to intercept, at least when you look at what what the public is thinking around the world. And so when the Russians used a hypersonic, I believe that was the epitome of that kind of a threat. It's according to the Russians and according to, the quote-unquote experts, even in America, they're indestructible, uncatchable. They'll just make it to their target. There's nothing you can do. It's hopeless. It's even worse than an ICBM. And they use those, and it's meant nothing. So I don't really know why they would want to use an ICBM this way, because it doesn't make any economic sense. And already they've kind of done this threat over with a weapon that, at least in public opinion, is even more dangerous and deadly than an ICBM would be.
I would have to disagree with you personally. I'm personally with A.F. Kaplan. In my mind, at least, obviously the Zircon is a weapon of psychological warfare as well. It has that psychological edge to it to put fear in the enemy, because it's a weapon that's been hyped up by the Russians beyond belief, and they've run with it like all the way. But I would still say that there's a big difference between that hypersonic missile, the Zircon, and also an ICBM. An ICBM carries with it that nuclear connotation. Even if it's not carrying a nuclear warhead, it does carry with it that implicit threat that we could put the nuclear warhead on it next time. We were able to fire it the first time with the non-nuclear one. That was your warning, and the next time it might have a nuke on it. I think that has a much greater psychological impact to it, and I don't think the Russians are worried about economics whatsoever. At this point, they're simply worried with survival and trying not to lose this war, which they are about to end up losing if they don't start doing desperate measures like doing something stupid like this. So, if they were to do it, it would be for that psychological reason, in my opinion, and the ICBM would carry with it probably a much larger fear factor.
Maybe so. I'm not really sure. Maybe it would. But I kind of feel like, because if you remember about it, Matthew, remember when they fired the first Kinzel, not the Zircon, just the Kinzel, into Ukraine, and everyone started freaking out because they're like, oh my God, no one intercepted it. It could have been nuclear armed. And then everything just disappeared with that. Like, no one even remembers that anymore.
I don't know if the news bulletins came out and I saw that Russia fired an ICBM at, like, let's say a city in Ukraine, let's say it's Kyiv, the capital, I would say, oh my God, like, even if it did not have a nuclear warhead on it, that indicates that Russia is like on the fringe of like completely going haywire, like beyond what they're currently doing, which indicates they're extremely close to actually using a nuclear weapon, because to fire an ICBM at Ukraine, it really makes no logical sense, first of all, and it would be really off the wall to do that. And that would indicate the utmost desperation, in my opinion. I'd be very concerned if that happened.
Maybe so. I see I see where everyone's coming from with this on maybe an ICBM is scarier, but from what I can tell, you know, and once again, like if you're looking at it logically, an ICBM is a lot scarier than a hypersonic because it has a greater, I guess you could say, yield that it's able to bring to the battlefield, at least on a nuclear level. But to the public, like, you know, that's the most important thing because, you know, just to let y'all know, we were watching and goofing on CNN for about an hour before the show. Usually we kind of like alternate in between watching Fox and then CNN and making fun of them. But we were watching CNN, and the analysis that they were doing on the war was horrendous. Like, it was terrible. Like, they were like, they're building nuclear shelters, and literally showed the pictures of the container boxes that we showed yesterday, and didn't really analyze them or break them down or anything like that. It was really stupid form of analysis. And so when we think about that, I just want to put that out there. The mainstream news is fairly stupid and works on surface level knowledge. And to a average journalist out there right now, like on CNN or Fox, to them, the biggest dangerous thing in the world, the boogeyman, is a hypersonic missile. Because that's all they talk about. They always talk about, oh, China's got a new one, and Russia's got a new one, and we don't have one. Oh, we're so dead. You know, and it's like, that is dumb, because anyone who has any sense would know that that's not the case. But nevertheless, moving on from that, that's what the public would think. If you just watch mainstream news, you would think ICBM, that's not really anything. But a hypersonic, now that's really something. That's really dangerous right there. And they've already done that threat on Ukraine by firing them into Ukraine, and they've actually hit some targets. And it didn't really mean a lot to anyone. Everyone just kind of ignored it after a week. I don't even honestly think that anyone here remembers it, because it was that big of a nothing burger in the end. It just moved on, and that was that.
Yeah, maybe so. Like on this one, I'm honestly going to have to stick to my guns on this one. And also, it looks like a lot of people in the chat agree with this as well. Like, I know what you're saying. Like, the hypersonic has that edge to it, that psychological edge. But the ICBM, in my mind, and I think in the minds of a lot of people, that's a whole nother animal. Just because, not necessarily because the ICBM is like, if they fire that, like, they mean business now. It's just the fact that Russia would go that far to do something that wild, like to fire an ICBM, which is meant to go all the way around the world. They're firing the thing right across the border to a neighboring country. That fact in its own, and the willingness to do that, would indicate that Russia is really, really on the edge. And that would be the main point of concern for me, is what's the next thing that Russia's about to do if they were willing to do something that extreme.
Maybe so, but still, moving on from this and into some more news that we've gotten that's also pretty interesting, we were also able to see that Ukrainian drones were attacking Moscow today. One of them ended up getting shot down at the Domodedovo airport. I believe that's just to the south of Moscow. We can see it right here. And we see them just watching it.
Domodedovo is like a good fallback option for them. If they can't hit anything else, they go for that one.
Man, they're like, you know what would be great? Hitting that stupid airport that sounds like a song intro. Domodedovo. You know, it's like, hit it again. Yeah. Sadly, they didn't hit it this time. The Russians actually did shoot the drone down. Oh. But still, moving on from that clip and out of the Moscow area, it's now time for us to move on into some other major news that we've also been able to hear today, is that down in Voronezh, something similar was also happening. Drones were continuing to strike the region of Voronezh over just the past few hours. Holy moly! And not only were they hitting Voronezh, they were also hitting into Gubkin, the silly little town of Gubkin, where a Russian HQ of the Northern Troop Group was apparently blown up today. Check this one out. We can see them looking over the desolate lands of Gubkin, which looks like an apocalyptic hellhole. And we now see the cameraman walking down the street and pointing their camera up to show us a little bit of smoke rising in the distance. We now see them zooming in again. This watermark just perfectly center of screen.
And it's absolute commie hellscape.
It does look like a commie hellhole out here in this place, wherever this is. And that's the end of that clip, but still nice to see they were able to hit a Russian headquarters within that area with just simple drones, which is pretty impressive in its own right. Also, speaking of which, before we move on into super big news, I thought I would show y'all this. One Russian caught a fat L as Tony was driving an MRAP and flipped it over on a highway in Russia and rolled it right over a car. So great to see that. Once again, Tony's back out there behind the wheels, the greatest menace to the Russian citizenry and the Russian Federation's armed forces. But once again, just reminding everyone to be safe out there on the streets. You never know when a Russian could be driving an MRAP, and it might be your time. But moving on
Good job, Tony.
A great job, Tutani. But moving on from that and on into some other major news, it's actually going to be taking us out of Russia, still relating to Russia, however, and on into the area right in the Denmark Strait. This area right up here. This little area right here. You'll see it. It's this area. It's this area near in a direction called the Great Belt. And this is a Great Belt. It doesn't look like a belt, but they call it that. Nevertheless, what was really interesting today is that the Danish Navy apparently brought out the belt on the Ypeng, because the Ypeng was apparently seized today by the Danish Navy. And we were able to hear a little bit of additional information about this today. This is the path of the Ypeng, and this was the last location it was at when it was seized by the Danish Navy. The Chinese vessel Ypeng 3 has been chased, intercepted, and boarded by a Danish Navy vessel Y311 after the Chinese vessel destroyed 2 undersea telecom cables linking Finland and Germany, and Sweden and Lithuania. The vessel sailed from Russia, and the captain is Russian, and most of the crew is also Russian. This is leading us to believe that this may have been a joint action by the Chinese and the Russians to sabotage vital communication links in between the Baltic states and the rest of Scandinavia and Central, well, really Western Europe. Or it may have been a solely Russian activity that occurred aboard a Chinese vessel to make the diplomatic situation a lot more convoluted and complex for the Western world to deal with. Nevertheless, it is a fairly large occurrence, and it does appear that this may be a direct attempt by the Russian Federation, at a minimum at this point, to start conducting sabotage attacks against vital communication infrastructure here inside the Western world. And once again showing that the Russians may be trying to escalate the conflict on their own, in a sense, really. And it looks a little unfortunate, because I hear that there's a lot of oil in Russia, and America's looking for some these days. But moving on from that...
Why does this seem like an episode, like a Scooby-Doo episode or something like that? It's like the Danish go and board the vessel on the Chinese sabotage ship, and they're like, let's see who's behind this this little incident right here. And they take the mask off, and they go, Sergei Shoigu. If only then bit of you meddling kids out, got in the way of cutting these cables. It's just like, dude, it's like, what the hell's up with that? It's like the Chinese vessel has the Russians on board. I mean, to me, you know, considering that the Chinese government owns so many companies inside of China, it seems like maybe there might have been some governmental level involvement in this. Of course, we don't have any concrete evidence of that, but I don't know. To me, it seems a little fishy that like nobody in China knew this was happening.
It does seem a little weird. It does seem weird. I don't know what to make of it at the moment, but we're going to leave y'all with that info that the captain, most of the crew was Russian, but it was a Chinese vessel, and it's now been seized by the Danish Navy. We're just going to leave the story there for now, but maybe we'll circle back to it in a couple of days when we get more info. Moving on into Belarus, though, we also got this very interesting phone call. Reminds us of a time from a while ago. I'm going to share this time with y'all from a while ago, while y'all hear that phone tone ring right there. This is from June of 2023, about exactly a year and a half ago. This phone call was apparently made in between Alexander Lukashenko and Yevgeny Prigozhin right in the middle of the Wagner coup. The 38 hours of glory, as some people would call it, as the Wagner PMC was racing up the highway from Rostov-on-Don to Moscow and attempting to overthrow pretty much the entirety of the Russian government by the time they had made it to Lipetsk, which became very clear at that point. This phone call, we do not know how it emerged, but I listened to it many, many times today before we made a short war video, and I listened to it before we got on the stream tonight, and I am entirely certain that this is not an AI-generated phone call or a fake. This sounds, due to the mannerisms and pretty much the perfection in which the speech is delivered by both sides over the phone call, to be an actual, genuine, real phone call that was made in between the two. And so I'm going to be getting y'all onto the phone call. I'm not going to be talking over it. I'm going to let the whole thing play in its entirety and let y'all just read the subtitles, because I don't want to overtalk them, just in case if people are having questions about the validity of the actual phone call. When you listen to it, it sounds incredibly genuine, at least with the audio quality and the perfection of the mannerisms of which both of them would have used. Well, Lukashenko still uses, and Prigozhin used to use before he got killed. So here's the clip.
Алло? Алло?
Один.
Алло.
Да, добрый день.
Да, добрый вечер. Вы перезванивали, да? Хотели бы поговорить?
Да. Не, что, переговорил он? Нет, не переговорил. Не знаете?
Я сейчас передам трубочку, он сам скажет.
Ага.
Алло.
Знаю, Гой.
Женя,
Да.
значит, я с ним еще не переговорил. Там все его окружение на ушах, они уже меня и уговаривают, и просят, ну еще чуть-чуть, еще чуть-чуть, ну подождите, ну ты знаешь эту ситуацию. Мы вот сейчас, вот чуть-чуть. Но наша пресс-служба, ну такое сделала, может быть, и вредное для нас заявление о том, что мы утром с президентом разговаривали, договорились, что мы будем делать все для мирного разрешения конфликта. И я предложил, что я переговорю с Евгением Пригожиным и попробую, ну, там договориться и так далее. На сегодня, да, мы провели раундов несколько переговоров и выработали абсолютно приемлемый вариант бескровного решения этого вопроса. То есть, ну, я уже несколько провоцирую российскую сторону. Возможно, у них другие варианты, понимаешь? Возможно, замочить Пригожина. Вариант.
Ну, да.
Возможно, всякие. Поэтому,
нет, мочить Пригожина, там столько тоже погибнет народу, что мама не горюй.
Вот об этом речь, что замочить-то можно, но сколько десятков тысяч ляснет народу. Да, и там где-то мост какой-то мы закроем, перекроем, встретим. Ну что встретим, это же кто там, ну минимум росгвардейцы максимум какие-то будут, а остальная милиция и мобилизованные, это же неподготовленные люди. Ну, как 41-м. Поэтому нельзя на это идти. Поэтому вот такое, буквально через 15 минут Эйсмонт готовит заявление от пресс-службы. Но я думаю, Путин поддержит эти предложения. Но хочу тебе, если это будет в этой ситуации более выгодный вариант, просто действовать по нашему плану. Прийти в Беларусь и все и разместиться на этих полигонах. Я скажу, что договоренности были, боевое слаживание, отдых и прочее. Ну, а Путину выскажу свое фэ.
И получится с него бабки, чтобы он оплачивал эти затраты, да?
Слушай, это мы решим, если даже он с ума сойдет и не даст деньги. Мы уже найдем...
Пускай поляки платят, чтобы не сувались к ним.
Может быть и это. Поэтому это мы договоримся. Это есть проблема, небольшая. Дальше будем работать.
It's a very interesting phone call. It's one in a series, apparently, because it sounds as though they had been on the phone just before, maybe about an hour or so ago, and it sounds as though this was towards the end. This would have been around the time, from what we're understanding, based off the details being said in the call, where the Wagner convoy had made it somewhere into the Tula Oblast and was beginning to rapidly approach the Oka River, which was pretty much where they gave up and turned around. They did not ever cross the Oka River, from what we understand. It's a very interesting call because it's giving us a lot more detail and information about what was going on in the background, and it appears the only thing we can really take away from the call is that the Belarusians were a lot more involved in the Wagner coup than we were originally anticipating, and it looks almost as though that Prigozhin was really starting to lean heavily on the Belarusians, and it appeared that the Belarusians were trying to have a very friendly relationship with them, which we did see for a short while after the Wagner coup had ended, but at that point the writing was on the wall that the Wagner was going to cease to exist because the Russians would not allow them to, and then just a little while later, Prigozhin ended up being killed. It's a pretty wild
and apparently the tens of thousands didn't actually get killed as a result of Prigozhin's death because, he died in the private jet, quote-unquote, accident, and there really wasn't much happening after that. It pretty much just died out.
Well, remember, that's because they got the whole conflict to die off and then did the little Russian disappearing act where he pretty much went into obscurity. So when he died, it was literally just a little side note of news. It was like, oh, nothing happened really. It was an unfortunate plane crash. We'll look into it. And then they never came out with any results from an investigation or anything because they had shot the aircraft down. So once again, really interesting to see there. And I also saw some people saying, I want to see them on film, saying that, I hate to say this, folks, but sadly, video photography is usually not accompanied by a phone call. I know many people usually have been on the phone, but I don't think Prigozhin at that point was going, oh my God, FaceTime me, man. Come on, let's get on FaceTime. I don't think that was happening. I think they were just on a phone call like normally would happen with phones, usually not having cameras in them. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, someone's about to say iPhones have cameras in them, and pretty much every modern smartphone has a camera. I'm talking about their purposes. I'm pretty sure that they probably were not taking and picking up those phone calls on iPhones. Probably a good bet. But moving on from that and out of that interesting phone call, kind of a ghost from a distant memory about a year and a half ago when the Wagner coup was an actual thing. We're now going to be moving on out of that area and back down towards the Ukrainian front lines that are currently inside the Kursk Oblast, as we have been getting a little bit of interesting news here and also seeing that heavy defensive action has been occurring by the Ukrainians on pretty much all fronts today. But before we get into that, I do want to make sure to be able to talk to some of y'all and answer some questions. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first Super Chat questions of the night. Our first one here is a very generous $100 donation from guess who? It is Hokey Redneck, the channel legend. And Hokey's back once again with that massive support, and huge shout out to you, good sir, for supporting the channel once again. And he says, do you think a nuke will be launched in Anger in My Life, 53, or Your Lives, and put a % on it?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, the chance of nuclear conflict is incredibly low. I'm generally not a fearmonger when it comes to that. I generally believe it's always low, even when it's getting really close to happening, because people will start to digress once there is an actual clear certainty that nuclear conflict's going to begin. So it never really gets to the point like a nuclear meltdown to where it goes out of control and explodes. No, it has never happened because a nuclear war has not happened yet. I just don't think that it really will ever happen. And so for that reason, also that doesn't mean that you can push people endlessly until they will start nuking someone. It generally means, though, that everyone will understand and be able to feel the room well enough to know nuclear bombs are about to start flying, so let's back off and make sure that they don't start flying. And so generally the tensions will manage themselves to where they can get really close to it happening, but then they will back off and it will not happen. So in my opinion, I would have to say, in your instance being 53, the chances are incredibly low. And even in my instance of being only 22, the chances are still largely low. A lot of people would say, oh, you know, it could happen any day now. But everyone was saying that as well during the Cold War, and no one ever got nuked. And the Soviet Union collapsed, the Cold War ended, and then the world went on for about the next 20 years until the Russian Federation did what it did in Georgia and Ukraine in 2008 and 2014, and then nuclear warfare started to look like it was a bit more of a certainty, but still has not happened, and I believe it generally will not. Also, if I'm ever wrong, I won't really have to live to say sorry for folks. Probably will be gone with the first wave of people who get wiped out. So that's what I would generally have to say. I just think the chance of a nuclear conflict ever happening in anyone's life is incredibly slim odds. Not impossible, but very slim. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And a huge thanks to you so much once again for the incredible support, Hokey Redneck, and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, before we move on, while I'm saying that there is a small percent chance, I would say that it's less than 1%. That's my general assumption. And that can change by day to day, but I generally do believe that just as a by and large long-term picture sort of a thing, the chance of a nuclear war breaking out is minuscule. And so with that, I hope that does also give you your percentage number that you were looking for. I generally don't work well with percentages, but I hope that was still a good shot in the dark at trying to come up with a percentage value on an opinion of mine. But still, a huge thanks to you so much once again for the incredible support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And I just saw Greg Keating say, Alabama will be safe, LOL. I guess you do not know. Alabama actually would be one of the more nuked states here in the East Coast of the United States. Interestingly enough, we actually have a lot of military assets inside of the state of Alabama. Huntsville would be wiped off of the map because of the Redstone Arsenal, as well as a whole bunch of other things that are focused in the Huntsville area. A lot of defense industries are based up there. The city that we're in currently, which is Birmingham, Alabama, would actually be targeted as well, because there is a strategic tanker wing of the Alabama Air National Guard at the Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport. They would also land a nuke on top of this larger industrial area out here, just north of the city, and I believe, if I remember correctly, they would also land a nuke right on top of the U.S. Steel factory near to Bessemer as well, if I'm remembering the targeting information correctly, because they publicly state that. America lists the targets that they would hit. Russia also states the targets that they would hit. It's a part of an ongoing treaty agreement to state what the targets are, so that way both sides knows. There also is a nuclear bomb that would slam down, I forgot, oh, wait a minute, hang on, not in Birmingham, that's all the targets in Birmingham. Then Another target that would be stricken would be inside of Montgomery, Alabama, which is the Maxwell Air Force Base, which is home to the Air War College, which is vital to training incoming U.S. pilots and other folks in the Air Force about how air wars are actually fought, which is something that a lot of people do not know about Montgomery, Alabama. But Montgomery, Alabama would also be wiped off the map as well because of the presence of Maxwell Air Force Base. Then Mobile, Alabama would be hit because it's quite simply a fort. Columbus, Georgia, which is pretty much Fort Benning, would also be slammed as well, simply for the fact that it is it's the largest army base in America, and so it holds a great deal of strategic importance. So for these reasons, Alabama would actually be nuked pretty heavily, just in those instances alone. And I believe there's actually other nuclear targets that would be hit in Alabama as well, if I remember correctly.
Also, I see someone, Rod Davis said in the live chat, said, oh, well, hold on, don't tell them what we got going on. It's like, no, they already knew this stuff. Like the Enforcer's saying, they've already published these targets a long time ago. And so they're definitely hitting Alabama. Like people think, oh, Alabama, like nobody wants to hit that. Nobody wants to even go to Alabama. But no, the Russians would be hitting Alabama for certain. If you're wondering what a good state is to go to if you don't want to get nuked, if that ever broke out, I think maybe Utah might be a good bet. But then again, there is a really big military base, an Air Force base right there in Salt Lake City. So I don't know. I don't know what really city would be good to go to. Like, for example, a state, if you're trying to avoid the nukes. Maybe like somewhere out in the middle of Montana, maybe. I don't know.
And let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can find y'all something here. Let's see here. Map shows, let's see, this is the most accurate nuclear attack map available for 2024. It's a very small one, but this generally shows where a large amount of the military targets would be. And so let me get rid of this. This is one of those prepper sites, so they're also trying to sell you something as well. But as you can see, Alabama actually gets nuked a great deal in a modern-day nuclear exchange scenario. And Alabama is actually one of the most nuked states beyond Montana, Wyoming, California, and also the northeastern area of the United States, which is a major population center, and therefore would quite clearly be a target. Beyond that, though, Alabama actually would be hit a quite significant amount, and also it appears that at least on this map, they would hit the Farley nuclear power plant, Fort Benning. They would not hit the Port of Mobile for some reason, which is a little interesting. Usually ports are a priority target, but they were hitting like literally every other port. So I don't know what's up with that on that map. But beyond that, I'm trying to, oh wait, hang on, I want to read this. What is the probability of nuclear war? Let's see here. Remains, so what they're saying though on this website, man, they're like, it really looks like it wouldn't happen, but just in case if it did, it's always good to buy stuff to be prepared. It's like, oh yes, I was like, I see. It's like, that's interesting there. But moving on.
I'm not gonna lie though, that company makes pretty good stuff. Like I'm not gonna lie, I know what company that was. They make some pretty good gas masks and things like that. That actually, I think the Ukrainians actually use their gas masks. But at least they were honest though on like the site. They said prepare and buy their equipment anyway, which is obviously their selling tactic. But they didn't go in and say like, oh, like nuclear war's happening like in the next 12 months or something like that. They basically said, we don't know when it's going to start, but still buy our stuff.
Dude, unlike others, some people like on YouTube who will sit there and be like, they'll listen to a radio man and be like, Tango, Whiskey, Alpha, Niner. Oh my God, that's it. The nuclear bombs are flying now. And it's like, how'd you get that out of that, man?
They say the same sequence every single day. It's like, it's nothing new, but he acts like every single day when they say the same, like, sequence of phonetic alphabet letters. Oh, that's it. The nukes are flying, y'all. Jump to the bunkers quickly.
One second. I want to pull this one up because I always get a laugh out of this one. I'm pulling up right now just to see what answer we get. Are the Doomsday planes always flying? So let's see. The United States Air Force is always, at least one Doomsday plane is always generated as a National Airborne Operations Center and on alert 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they are always in operation. That's the whole point of the Doomsday plane. They keep them on the tarmac, and also what that means, just to explain that really quickly, we have 4 Doomsday planes. They're 747s that are modified for a specific mission of nuclear deterrence, but still, out of the 4, there's always one of them that's just sitting on the tarmac with its engines running and everyone inside of it ready to go. So at any moment, if something was to happen, that plane immediately takes off and goes airborne. Sometimes they do fly them around just pretty much to get the mileage in, to put it lightly. But beyond that, that is what that's how it works. It's like saying that the doomsday planes are flying. It's like that's nothing special, really. It's like they do that from time to time, and they're always running. So anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But still, a huge thanks to you once again, Hokey Redneck, for the massive support and help of this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here. This one is going to go to Pemiyoy, who puts in a $60 donation. And thank you very much, Pemiyoy, for the very generous support as well. And they said, let's go, and much love.
And thank you so much for the support, Pemiyoy, and let's go, and thank you for the great love. We always love the Lee Spring Army, and I think that it's absolutely incredible that so many of y'all are here tonight. At the peak, there was about 13,000 people here tonight, and it's crazy to see that there's still about 11,000 people here at the moment. We always thank y'all massively for watching this channel and enjoying it greatly, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep this thing running, because y'all are what helps us to keep the lights on behind the scenes and do this as a full-time job. And not only that, y'all are the folks who made it possible for me to save up enough to be able to get that Armed Forces medley put out there, and boy, what a humdinger it is. That is an amazing Armed Forces intro, and it looks like loads of people are still loving it and enjoying it tonight. It's one hell of a treat. I've actually listened to it maybe 20 times today, because I just think it's that good, and I gotta tell y'all, I'm a big fan of patriotic music, and I gotta thank you so much for supporting this channel, Pemiyoy, because not only do you help us to do this as a full-time job, you help us to be able to do amazing projects like that to support the patriotic works of this grand republic, and to continue to push forward the public image and perception that the Western world, united together in its pride of what it is and what it has become, will continue to press forward to victory against the Axis powers of the world. And so a big thanks to you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving right back into the news.
All right, so real quick, to address some breaking news here that people are asking about quite a bit, actually I've been seeing people ask about it all night, I've had a chance to look into it, and it does look like that the entirety of Ukraine is under a potential ballistic missile threat right now. It looks like pretty much every part of Ukraine is lit up in red on the alert map, and apparently that alert has not been de-issued, or it hasn't gone away just yet. So it looks like it's mainly a ballistic missile threat. And I'm not really sure if I'm accurate with this, but I think it might be a little bit unusual to see an entire red map here for Ukraine for a ballistic threat. Is that normal, Enforcer, for the entire map to be lit up red for a ballistic threat? Like, I understand, like, air attacks, that's common. Like, that happens all the time. But specifically for ballistic missiles.
I wouldn't know to be sure, because I've never heard it divided up into ballistic and drone threats. It's always just been air raid threats. I've never heard it divided up like that before to know.
Interesting, because they're specifically saying a ballistic threat. They're not saying any other type of threat. They're just saying ballistic missiles right now.
I think, let's see, I think we actually have an air attack map on last week's. Let me see, actually, maybe on this one. Let's see here. Where would it have been? Maybe in the location unknowns? Final test of Ukrainian heavy bomber. Yeah, nope, it's not on this one. It must have been on last week's map. But we had a map at some point showing where ballistic missiles had been launched, and I think most of them ended up hitting pretty much all across Ukraine. So I'm not really sure, based off of that, if it's normal or not. Usually I go with things that are fairly normal, because that's just generally the standard, but I will have to try and look into that a little bit more and see, because at the moment I don't really think I have a precedent to know whether a ballistic attack threat is common for the entire country. I know that air alert air alerts have been common for the whole country at a single time quite a lot, really recently, but I don't know about ballistic threats. So with that, I think we're going to have to move on from that. And maybe you can do some sleuthing in the background, or I could do some off air after the show is over and try and get an answer for that. Or by that point, it wouldn't really matter, because we would have seen what would happen. But still, with that, wait, and did we actually get the last super chat of this segment, Matthew?
We have not. We need to get that last super chat here.
Dang.
And also, by the way, like, just to clear this up just a little bit, this does appear to be a little bit unusual, but I'm not going to jump the gun to say, like, oh, it's time to, like, panic and start running around like maniacs or anything like that. But it does look a little bit unusual, but I don't have enough information to really come to any conclusions on that just yet, so I will keep looking. But nonetheless, moving on to our next super chat here, and our last one of the segment. This one goes to Robin, who puts in a $50 donation, and thank you very much, Robin, for that support indeed, and we appreciate it. They said, in Marine Reno, the sanatorium being a Russian HQ. And does this mean that the inmates are really running the place?
That's honestly a good question right there. And the answer to that is not really. The sanatorium isn't only a sanatorium by name these days. It's not a sanatorium at all. It's an old and insane asylum, which is kind of funny to think about that the Russians are running a command post from a literal loony bin. But that's what it technically was back in the day. Nowadays, it's some sort of an estate or a property that is just simply owned by the Russian Federation's government. It's kind of like, for example, like the best way to explain this is how the Tower of London, for a while, let me go over here and get this because this one's always an interesting story to talk about here and a good example of this. Here we go. Here's the Tower of London. So, the Tower of London used to be a palace and fortress of the royal family. The royal family, and this was very early on in English history, later on they built the castle at Windsor, and so the royal family pretty much moved to Windsor Castle as their permanent residence, and then the Tower of London pretty much sat kind of unoccupied for the best part to explain it. It wasn't their primary residence anymore, and it certainly wasn't after a little while, but still, they had to figure out something to do with it, so the palace and fortress turned into a prison. It was literally a prison, I believe, for a couple of hundred years and an execution ground, and then after it was a prison and execution grounds for a little while, then they finally decided to turn it back into a kind of a not really a royal residence, but almost like a royal storage site or a storage lot because they keep a lot of the crown jewels and also other valuable royal family heirlooms inside of the Tower of London. So it's kind of like that. It was a government-owned facility that once was a sanatorium, but now it's been changed into being a Russian command post. So a good joke. I like the joke because honestly, like the Russian commanders are always like nuts anyway. So I wouldn't think that would be a big stretch. But it's kind of similar to the Tower of London. It's a property that had an original purpose, but then changed purpose many times over the couple of hundred, well, actually over about the 1,000 years that this building has existed. But for that sanatorium in particular, considering its architectural style, probably originated in the 1700s, and so it's only lasted for a couple of hundred years, maybe about 300 or so. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can and gives a pretty good example out of London. Really cool city, very interesting one at that. But it is now time, thank you once again, by the way, for the support, for us to move on into the rest of the news that we have tonight. Moving on into the Kursk Oblast, we were able to see that a fiber optic drone isn't always infallible, as this Russian fiber optic drone actually lost signal right before it was about to hit its target. And we can see the target right down there. It's a Ukrainian pickup.
They're only getting 20 FPS too. That's kind of sucks.
It is. And the communication was just lost right there with the drone, and it slammed down somewhere, apparently not into the truck, but still, it is showing us that fiber optic drones aren't always perfect. That's actually the only clip that we got out of the Kursk Oblast today, so moving on from that and into the rest of the location unknowns, we also got to see some Ukrainian forces in training today with the Stryker, a very cool American armored personnel carrier, of course with a Browning 50. We love the Browning 50, we love the Stryker. It's a great American piece of engineering, and moving on from that and into the next piece, we also got to see a Ukrainian drone carrier in use. Check this thing out.
Oh, that is so cool, man. It's carrying drones on the wing. Like this thing looks pretty large right here. This is a massive one carrying the drones.
Yeah, it's really cool, actually.
Also, that looks like a really like strong motor right there. It looks like a kind of like a normal size hobby motor powering the thing too. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, it is really cool. And in a second, we're about to see that the drones launch. And so they launch, and then they flip over right side up. Here in a second, it tumbled a little bit. And then it goes down towards the ground and starts finding targets. So this really extends the range of the bomber drones that are attached to this larger carrier drone that is dropping them off at the moment.
That is ingenious, really. Like the whole attachment system for the little smaller drones, that's really genius.
It is. It's incredibly cool, honestly. And we can see that they found their target, which is the truck. And then the clip ended. We can now see the second drone is getting spooled up at the moment, and then it's going to be dropped off the wing right about now. And then it goes and flips over. And we can see that that's a little bit of an issue sometimes. But it finally stabilizes itself and is able to get the motors working fast enough to be able to hold up its weight. And then it gets on the move going to find the target. And we can see that this drone right here, the actual carrier drone, is now just orbiting the area and waiting for these drones to finish their tasks. If I remember correctly, this drone actually carries even more drones than this.
Also, Fayuma asked a question here. He said, is the drone carrier, the mothership drone, is it also carrying a transmitter to extend the smaller drone's range? I was wondering that too. I'm not sure if the enforcer would know that,
Yes.
the answer to that question. It is?
Yes, this entire thing, the whole purpose and existence of this drone design is to extend the range of the smaller drone. So it has a transmitter on board, and it also is able to carry them far out enough that the transmitter is, of course, usable and it has a purpose, and it also allows for these drones to start hitting targets way farther behind the line. So it has everything built into it to be able to accomplish that mission.
Aha, so there's your answer for you, man. That's very ingenious. Like, I was thinking that when I was watching it. I was like, okay, it's extending the range by actually, like, physically taking the drone further down the battlefield, but is the range of the transmitter being extended? So they thought of everything. Like, I got to give it to the Ukrainians. Like, we've said this time and time again. Their ingenuity on creating new weapons and also new devices to carry stuff like this is really crazy. Like, they're just like, they're actually, honestly, it seems like ahead of, like, the American defense contractors when it comes to actually creating, like, smaller systems that aren't, like, multi-billion-dollar systems. They're much more ingenuitive when it comes to that.
And they really are. And it looks like, honestly, a lot of their ingenuity is bringing forward some incredible results, as we were able to get the casualty report today, and
holy cow!
Holy
only
moly.
2 Bobcats, not too great, but they got 1,700 troops, 100 vehicles. What the hell? Tell us more.
I gotta tell you, man, it's been absolutely crazy over the past 24 hours. We've been able to see that 1,690 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 27 APCs, 100 supply trucks, 8 main battle tanks, 49 artillery pieces, 91 drones, 2 cruise missiles, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. And according to Miss Disa, the keeper of the records, Miss Disa has stated that 1,690 Russian soldiers wounded and killed is the 5th highest troop loss, tied with November 14th and October 26th, and 91 drones and 100 fuel vehicle, 100 supply trucks, and 91 drones and 100 supply trucks both rank as the 13th highest losses in those categories. And so that is a pretty impressive loss record to see again today, and it is showing that the Russian Federation is still not boding that well, at least in conserving manpower. And moving on into the Vovchansk area, we got to see that a little bit up close and personal today with the 3rd Brigade using a grenade launcher on them Russians. You see them moving up the trench. We see them slowly moving their way down, and the firefight has now begun. We see this guy firing his rifle grenade right there. We see him loading a new one. That's a GP-25 rifle grenade. Well, not a rifle grenade launcher, but it's a grenade launcher. And we see this guy uses it pretty proficiently, actually.
Whoa. He gets extra points for being super close to the neck of the other guy.
Yeah, he gets bonus points.
Мирончик, работа. Работа, Мирон.
Oh, you see this guy's got an unlimited supply of these things, apparently.
Давай, блядь,
Now we cannot read off those words, heavens.
Yeah, boy.
Hey, you said yeah, boy, though. Yeah, boy.
Погоди, сука. Давай.
Everyone's saying yeah, boy. And there goes another rifle grenade, and holy moly, it's dead on hit again. This guy's getting a kick out of it.
Выход! РПГ, вижу, кто работает!
Oh, there's a guy down there with an RPG. I think they dealt with it. Now they're firing more rifle grenades.
Сука.
Ah, that one's a misfire.
Кроешь? Ушел. Тут еще перед тобой есть? Один. Давай, давай.
And a couple of new
Не
rifle
могу
grenades.
закрыть ХПшка, братанчик. Мы кроем с тобой здесь.
And there goes another rifle grenade.
Есть. Есть.
Есть! Плюс!
Хуй знает, проверь. Клинчик? Да. Все, отходим? Нет. Все. Отход. Секс, отход.
We now see them moving through the trees as they continue to fire on the Russian position. That was almost a friendly fire incident right there. Well, you see the winter air. It's incredibly cold out there. It's turning their breath into smoke, you see.
Куда хотел, туда и башил. Ты видел? Я охуел. Охуенно, да? Я охуел. Это я только навесом стрелял до этого. Сука! Хуй знает. Кому-то в голову, походу, попал. Видел каску и въебал в каску.
And that's the end of that clip, but he seems that he was having a fun time out there today with the GP-25, the AK version of the underslung rifle grenade launcher. But moving on from that, now the Vovchansk front, we're now going to be moving on down towards the area of Kupiansk, as we got to see that the 14th Brigade blew up another Buke today. And there's the Buke, and the Ukrainians are about to make it puke. And here it comes. Actually, this is a duplicate clip from yesterday. I just saw that right there, and I was like, that is a duplicate. We're going to be deleting that one. And moving on further down the line to Seversk, where we were able to see the tank commander of the 54th Mechanized Brigade conducting an awards ceremony, and that is a sick AR right there, with a Trigicon ACOG on top of it as well. This guy has taste.
It looks like, let's see, that could be a Daniel. Everything's a Daniel. It could be a Daniel. I think it is.
Man, I always just call them ARs because I'm not going to lie, every single one of them looks just about the same. Like, I'm like, you know, unless you see, like, the side of the receiver and see, like, Daniel Defense or FN or Palmetto State Armory or something like that, you will not know that. Well, Palmetto State Armory guns usually are, like, broken by that point. I'm just kidding. Palmetto State Armory actually isn't that bad these days from what I've been hearing. But beyond that.
That could be a SIG. It could be a SIG, maybe. Either a Daniel or a SIG.
I don't know. But he is issuing out those awards with class. Look at this. And they're all giving him some applause. It looks like a fun time, actually. And with that, that's
Daniel Hoffpower in the live chat said, I'm a Daniel. Hey, you are a Daniel. How about that? We got our own Daniel right here in the live chat. I love it.
Damn, Daniel. Moving on from that and down to Touretsk, we were also able to see the 28th Mechanized Brigade assaulting some Russian positions in the Touretsk front today. Also, by the way, I wanted to give you all a funny joke, y'all. I thought this was hilarious. So when we were watching CNN earlier today, you know, for like, I don't know how long it was. What was it, Matthew? Like 30 minutes? Like, it was literally just
30 minutes tops. Barely anything.
Yeah,
really.
You can't really tolerate that much. I heard one of the hosts, I'm not going to say the name of the host, but they know who they are. But they sat there and said, look at this. We have some rare battlefield footage coming out of Ukraine. And it was literally footage like this. And I was like, are you deaf? Are you goofy? Like, I was like, footage like this is not rare. This is common. This comes out like daily. Like, it's like, I don't even know what planet they're on at this point reporting this news, because they're acting like, look, it's just like a rare instance of actual fighting in Ukraine. It's like, this isn't the Donbass in 2016. This is modern day Ukraine. This is a conventional war. There's trench fights going on daily out there. You know, I was like, I don't even know where the hell these people are getting this stuff from.
I don't either, man. I couldn't watch it for too long. I definitely couldn't turn on Fox either. Like, to play it fair here, I couldn't turn on Fox, like either one of them.
No, that's not even trying to play it fair. That's just honesty, because you know they're going to have that annoying comedian guy on. I don't know who writes his jokes, but they're the worst jokes ever. I've never heard, like I'm not saying that because I don't like his jokes. His jokes just don't land. Like, I'm like, I don't even know what these are supposed to be. Like, they'll be sitting there talking about something and be like, well, that's a wowzer, and that's supposed to be like a joke. I'm like, that's just a statement, man. That's not like a joke. Where's the punchline? It's a terrible thing, mainstream news is. But
you know what's funny? When they go into the trench and they drop their gun on the ground and the rock gets flipped over, yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it's something like that. Oh, and then they gave the guy his own segment. I'm like, what are y'all doing? You're killing the ratings. Get rid of him. And Andrew Palmino said it right. Most of them are rags, and I would agree. It's just not good stuff. Like, even if you get rid of the whole partisan side of things and they're just talking neutrally, it's terrible. Like, the news that they cover is horrendous. And it really makes us understand because, we don't watch it a lot, or at least I don't, while we're, talking over this Tourette's battlefield footage. But I don't watch it a lot, so we're always saying that we're better than the mainstream news. I really don't know by how much. And not to toot my own whistle here while this Russian is surrendering on film, but we do way better in analysis. Like, that's not a opinion-based thing, that's a qualitative-based thing on fact. We give way more detail and information about any topic that we're talking about than you would ever see on CNN or Fox. We are actual news. They're not. And then another thing is that people are like, you're not real news because you're not there. And it's like when you watch CNN now, they literally pull the same clips we pull from almost the same locations. Like, it's no joke. And then they're like 2 days behind.
And also, they give way too little time to the actual important news. Like, when they come across, like, the geopolitical news, they spend, like, 5 minutes on it. They bring on one or two, like, former generals, and they give them, like, 30 seconds apiece to, like, summarize the entire war. And that's not enough time to, like, discuss anything. That's just enough to basically say, yeah, Ukraine's doing good, and I like Ukraine. It's like, okay, well, that wasn't very helpful, but thank you.
Dude, I liked it when the one host, she just said the guy's name. She was like, Robert? He was like, huh? And then they just sat there for like 20 seconds. It's like, you're not going to ask him a real question? Also, that's another thing that just drives me crazy is that no one ever listens to their guests anymore. Like, they'll be like, so tell me about something. And then they just start looking down and doing paperwork while they're talking. And then they look and they're like, Janet, how about you? Okay, thanks. And now we're on to a break. See y'all around. And then they go to a break and then they bring on new people. And I'm like, this is horrendous. Like, this isn't even news. This is just filler. But moving on from that, so that way we're not just filler, we can also see some Ukrainian drone attacks happening in Pokrovsk. And while we do hear that Pokrovsk is a very active battlefield even currently, and the Russians are still trying to push through, we don't really get a lot of footage, especially no footage from Seladove, which we still understand is half under the control of the Ukrainians and half under the control of the Russians. We don't get a lot of footage there at this point, and it's kind of giving us an idea, possibly through video and picture evidence, that the offensive, at least in this direction, is losing steam on the Russian side, because we're just not getting a lot of proof that there's battlefield activity going on down here at the moment.
Now, one thing's for certain, you won't see this on CNN. Look at this.
Oh man, I'm telling you.
Oh, man. They get no respect around here. They get no respect.
But then they'll get that British guy to narrate the segments. They'll be like, look at this Russian. He's hopping out because he hasn't had food to eat. And there are no birds in Russia, for they've all been eaten. Except for these. And these will be eaten on Tuesday.
And you can see here, this footage was simply too graphic to show, so we had to clip it out of the entire news broadcast and leave you with this nice cartoon here about Wagovi.
And it's so melancholy and dramatic. Like, they'll just look at a normal person walking down the street and they'll be like, as they walk back from the street, from the grocery store, just tired of it all and ready to jump. And it's like, where the hell are you getting all this from? Like, that's just someone walking home. Like, what's wrong with you? But also, we did get to hear something that is fairly concerning, is that apparently Russia is conscripting troops from the occupied territories. We've kind of known about this for a little bit, but it seems to be ramped up currently due to the complete lack of manpower inside of Russia. And that's generally why we understand that they're bringing North Koreans in larger numbers and trying to arrange that to where it actually can happen. And now it also appears that they're trying to get more troops, at least out of the occupied territories, whatever they can scrape at this point. It's really a scraping the barrel sort of an endeavor. And we can see, I would honestly say, well, I'm not honestly saying, these are actually officers of the Russian armed forces. You can see it on their caps. Also, what happened to the officers' caps, man? At some point they said, make them goofy looking, because this just looks goofy.
Yeah, it really does. It's, I can't tell if it's too small for his head.
So now they're having their banner ceremony. Fairly normal occurrence. With a goose step and all. I believe these are some sort of cadets or something that they're trying to put into the Russian armed forces from Donetsk. By the way, this is Donetsk City that this is being filmed in, which I forgot to mention up until this point.
Juan Milton said, isn't this a war crime? I'm pretty sure this is outlawed by the Geneva Conventions. I would say so.
Yes, this is actually a violation of the rules of war, because this is technically not a part of the Russian Federation. These are not citizens of the Russian Federation. Nevertheless, they're putting them in the Russian armed forces and also waterboarding them, as you can see on film right here, to put them into the Russian army. Also, their marching is horrendous.
Yeah, but terrible, man. I've seen better marching out of high school JRTCs than that.
Man, and that's not saying much, honestly. But moving on from that into Volodar, we also got to see some Russians having a little fight for survival here. Check this out. It's an FPV drone coming in behind this Blanca that's passing them. Actually, that's a Chinese ATV. And there goes the drone. Are they firing into the back of the ATV at this point? Like, are they actually doing that? What's the worst, the Ukrainian FPV drone or the Russians trying to shoot the drone down?
Yeah, and also their electronic warfare apparently isn't working either.
Yeah, the drone jamming gun over there didn't really do much.
Oh,
I
actually got it.
I don't know if they, like, let's see here. I don't know if they did. I don't know what that was, man, because it exploded upwards. I don't know if that was their FPV drone or what, because it's like, did it just stop chasing the ATV? It's like, that doesn't even really make a lot of sense. Maybe it did, but it looks like they may have actually shot it down, at least from what we're seeing on film. But moving on from that, and all the way full circle now, on up into the area of Kyiv, it's time for us to talk about something that is a little interesting. Zelensky has said that there will be no armed forces recapture of Crimea, and Ukraine is to pursue a diplomatic liberation of Crimea and will not acknowledge the occupied territory as Russian. And according to a direct quote from Zelensky today, he said, "We cannot spend dozens of thousands of our people so that they perish for the sake of Crimea coming back." And so it appears that Zelensky is abandoning the idea of regaining Crimea on the battlefield. That's something that we largely said a while ago on this channel, considering that it doesn't appear that their river campaign ever had any real success beyond making beachheads, and then those were quickly bogged down, and also the Surovikin line and the failure of the summer of 2023 offensive largely stopped really any offensive ambitions from ever reaching Crimea itself. And so it appears that Crimea, at least according to Zelensky, will not be regained directly through the war. It seems as though he's hoping to get it back at the diplomatic concessions table whenever the negotiations or the peace talks finally start to come around again, whenever that may be. But before we move on from this, a lot of people are wondering, what will the future look like? And that's kind of a big question. We don't really know what the future will look like at this point, because, of course, this statement is kind of moving us on into that direction that we kind of all knew was coming around with Crimea, because it just seemed as though the offensive actions that were going on, at least in the southern front and near to the river at Kherson, or the Dnipro River, just were not really that successful. And it never brought Crimea under the gun, or under Ukraine's reach. And for this reason, a lot of people are wondering, what will the war look like in the next 2 to 3 months? And a lot of people are having some different opinions on this. Some people are believing that the Russians are going to lose ground and negotiate. Some people are believing that the Russians are going to take very extreme actions because the war isn't necessarily going in their favor. Some are saying that they're unsure and undecided, and others are believing that Russia will retake ground and then negotiate from a position of strength. But Matthew, what are folks thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So about 35% of the audience, actually the most amount of people chose this option here. It says Russia will take extreme action soon, and that's what they foresee happening in the next 2 to 3 months in the war, while 32% said Russia will lose ground and then negotiate from a position of losses, while 16% said Russia will retake ground and then negotiate from a position of strength. And honestly, like, I'm not going to mince words here. This is my honest thoughts on the issue. I know some people are going to say, that's a bit fear-mongering, but honestly, I'm with the 35%. I think Russia is going to do something extreme here in the next month or so. I'm not really sure what the extreme action is going to be, but I'm getting a bad gut feeling that Russia is getting on the verge of being stupid because they realize that they're about to have to enter negotiations, and it might not go the way that they're wanting it to go, or the war might end up dragging out for several more years. And Russia is getting to the point where their economy is getting pelted, and they're really suffering internally, and they really can't afford this much longer, and they might have to take very extreme actions to try to get the war turned in their favor. So I think, honestly, that's what it's going to be. And then afterwards, we'll have to see if negotiations even happen after they do whatever they're going to do. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I think that the war is... I'll be entirely honest, I don't really see Russia losing any ground. I don't see Russia taking any ground. I really see the front line existing as it is right now, because the Ukrainians aren't really conducting a lot of offensives, and if they are at this point, it's in Vovchansk. And when they are conducting the offensive in Vovchansk, there really isn't a lot of progress to be made there, from what we're seeing at the moment. And in other directions where the Russians are conducting the offensives, which are literally across the rest of the front line, they're not making any progress either in pushing the Ukrainians back. That's in Kursk, that's in Kupiansk, that's in the Severodonsky Forest, that's at Seversk, that's at Toretsk, that's at Pokrovsk, that's at Volodar. There's really no differences or changes being made on those front lines at this point. I don't really think either side can. I think it has entered, to be entirely honest with y'all, a World War I sort of a phase at this point, where both sides are pretty much on par. The Ukrainians have superior technology, but less manpower, and the Russians have inferior technology, but technically more manpower. And so they both level each other out, and for this reason, it's pretty much a pure-on-pure conflict that turns into a bloody stalemate that devolves into trench warfare like we've been seeing for quite a while. I just don't really see the territory of either side changing, and I think that's going to actually make even more desperate actions occur, because both sides are going to be trying to make it change. And really the only way to do that is to pretty much just completely destroy the rear lines and then hope that that pretty much causes them to implode. So the Ukrainians are going to be slamming everything that they can deep inside of Russia. The Russians are going to be trying to do the same thing to Ukraine, and eventually one side is going to be more successful in that metric than the other, and that might finally be when one front line starts to budge, and then it might give. And who knows whose side that would be at this point. I honestly believe it would probably be the Russians, if anyone, because it does seem as though, as far as the air defense is concerned, because once again, that's really where the most important battles kind of being fought at this point is in the air defense. The Ukrainians are winning that fight handily. And while the Ukrainians don't intercept everything, they intercept around 70 to 80% of all of the incoming air targets, the Russians only intercept around 10%, meaning that in terms of the amount of, I guess you could say, bombs lobbed at each other, more Ukrainian bombs are going to be hitting Russian targets than Russian bombs are going to be hitting Ukrainian targets. And that means that over time, the Ukrainians will be able to win in that rear line kind of a scenario that both sides are going to be forced in at this point. And so that would be my honest opinion. And if anything, I would say not only are the Russians going to go to the extremes, I would also say that the Ukrainians, in any way that they can, are also going to be going to the extremes as well, because either one side or the other has to win. And the only way to win at this point is to start ramping it up outside the battlefield to the greatest extremes possible. And so, with that statement, it is now time for us to move on into today's speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And it was an interesting one, and a slightly long-lasting one. And I mean, just hardly long-lasting, but still, nevertheless.
Long-lasting speech. We have 2 minutes and 27 seconds. If you will give me the chance, I will speak in that short amount of time. Yes, speech.
And here is the speech.
Дорогі українці, українки, коротко про цей день. Перше, сьогодні було багато нервів і питань про якусь особливу небезпеку. Хоча скільки жорстоких і підлих ударів Росії ми вже пройшли за цей час. Завжди треба звертати увагу на повітряну тривогу. У нас такий сусід, божевільний. Сьогодні у 1001-й день повномасштабної війни Росія так само божевільна, як і в 1000-й день і 24 лютого. Інформаційне нагнітання, яке було сьогодні, якісь панічні повідомлення, які пересилали, все це тільки Росія ж і допомагає. Будь ласка, бережіть себе, допомагайте нашій армії, дбайте, зокрема, щоб ніхто не міг використати ваші емоції в своїх власних інтересах. А ми продовжуємо зміцнювати ППО. Друге, є новий пакет підтримки від Америки, обсяг $275 мільйонів. В пакеті безпілотники, снаряди для хаймарсів та артилерії. Дуже важливо міни, щоб зупиняти російські штурми. Це дійсно посилить наших хлопців на фронті. І це вже 70-й оборонний пакет від Сполучених Штатів Америки. Україна цінує двопартійну підтримку Америки і рішення президента Байдена. Дякую. Третє. Говорив сьогодні з прем'єр-міністром Польщі Дональдом Туском, подякував за всю надану підтримку від перших днів вторгнення. Ми обговорили підготовку нового пакету від Польщі для України, а також головування Польщі в Європейському Союзі, яке почнеться вже з нового року. Можемо разом зробити значні речі і для наших народів, і для всієї Європи. І ще одне. провів зустріч з директоркою Світового банку з питань операційної діяльності, говорили про нашу фінансову стійкість, про наші програми підтримки і про кошти від російських заморожених активів. Це абсолютно справедливо, що російські кошти мають працювати для захисту від російської ж агресії. Винуватець війни повинен за неї платити. Платити і відповідати. Я дякую всім, хто допомагає нам наближати справедливий мир. Слава Україні!
And the Rom Slava. And Matthew, are you there? Are you there, Matthew? Is your mic muted, Matthew? Because I'm not hearing a single word that is coming through your microphone right now. Let's see here. Let me take Matthew off screen really quickly, and let me check something here.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can finally hear you now. What did you do?
Oh my God, man, I was so scared. I don't even know what happened. I muted my mic, and then I unmuted it, and then it was not showing up green when I was talking. I don't know what happened, man. I got so scared. Oh, let's see, the stream failed to start. Oh no, Discord's having problems again. Let's see here. I can't see the screen share. Can you restart it real quick?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I can restart that. I had to shut it down to see if you were even talking at all at that point. But can you see it now?
No, I think Discord might be having some issues, but that's okay.
Oh,
There's nothing left to see, I guess. So we're good. We're good.
Well, on that note, though, I suppose it is time for us to move on into that second speech. And also, the end of that speech kind of caught me off guard, honestly, too, Matthew. I had my mic muted and then had to get off the speech and then unmuted to be able to get back to tacking. But nevertheless, it is time for us to move on into the second part of this stream where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. It's always an incredibly fun time because there's loads of interesting questions, and we usually do all kinds of fun stuff and get away with it in the question segment because we don't have to cover the news at this point. But I do have to say, a huge thanks to everyone who's been here tonight. 13,000 people were here at the peak of tonight's stream, and so far around 80,000 people have watched as we're reaching the second hour of the stream. I've got to thank everyone massively who has been on the channel today and watching it. So far, today's short war summary actually got about 230,000 views at this point, and it appears that a load of people greatly enjoyed that one. And also on top of that, a load of y'all have watched this stream tonight as well. We've got to thank you all so much for picking this channel to be your primary news provider of what's going on not only in Ukraine but around the entirety of the world whenever major events flare up, and it's a massive honor and a privilege that we have to be able to tell all of y'all the news. If y'all do enjoy it, please, by all means, subscribe. Doesn't mean anything in the algorithms. It means a great deal to us, though, and we love to see when people are subscribing, because about 1.4 thousand people have joined the Lee Spring Army and the channel today by subscribing. And so the channel is still growing by massive leaps and bounds, which is something of an amazing thing, really, a miracle of a sort, because we don't ever expect people to ever join the channel or subscribe for that matter. And we're hitting 310,000 subscribers as of today, and we're halfway to getting to 311 as of right now. And so a huge thanks to every single one of y'all for watching so far. And Matthew, bring us on to the second segment. I understand that we have a load of interesting things to talk about.
So yes, we do. But real quick, I need to get people caught up on the big breaking news right now, because a lot of people are still wanting to know what is happening right now inside of Ukraine, because of course, we did get word earlier that the entire country of Ukraine is under a ballistic missile threat from every corner of Ukraine. So that is a very big thing happening right now. And I can report to you that several cruise missiles have entered Ukrainian airspace in Chernihiv region, flying over toward the Kyiv region. So once again, no evidence right now that Russia is launching ICBMs. That is not happening whatsoever. Right now, it is simply cruise missiles going into Ukraine, and we could be witnessing the start of another Russian heinous attack on civilian infrastructure. That's probably what we're looking at right here, but once again, the information is very preliminary, and we don't have many details or footage just yet, but I will keep an eye out for that. And we are going to move into our Super Chat segment once again here, and this one is going to go to none other than Cypress96, who puts in a $27 donation, and thank you very much, Cypress, for the support. They said, good evening, and I watched last night's stream today, and so I couldn't comment then, and you did an awesome job, and well done, and I love it. And what would it be possible to see just the orchestra live during the whole medley, not on stream?
And I thank you so much for the support and enjoying last night's stream, and also enjoying the Armed Forces intro of Cypress 96. I got to thank you greatly for that. As far as watching the orchestra play, I'm kind of wondering how we're going to do that, because the thing is that it cost it actually cost additional to get all that filmed, and so there were some guys down there on the orchestra floor going around filming. But the thing is that they don't put together a continuum of clips. They just sent me, I think it was like 60 raw clips of everything everywhere that they were filming, and just, you know, pretty much told me to go ham and do what I want with it, and that's what was the original thing that I agreed to when getting them. So I would have to kind of like clip together all of those clips and also sync them as well, which is a very difficult thing because you would think, like with how an orchestra works, and let me explain how it works because it's incredibly cool. It works a lot like video editing does, and Matthew would understand this very well because we both do this every day. So when you make a video, at least Matthew really does this. I'm a one-take person. I just start the recording and do one take in the take, and that's my video. But back in the day, I used to do the same thing Matthew did, which is where you would record the video, and you would take the best parts, and you would keep them in, and you get the bad parts, you'd throw them out, and you'd end up coming up with an amalgamation, and it ends up being a final product that is seamless. And that's exactly how orchestras work in the modern day. They have a microphone in front of every single instrument on the orchestra floor, and when they play, it picks up each instrument individually. Well, actually each section individually, but sometimes each instrument depending on how important they were individually. And so then after the fact, after they do, I think it was like over the course of an hour, I think there was about 24 takes or 25 takes of the song. A sound mixer comes in, and then he puts together every single good part, every single good take of every single instrument in each category, and then puts them together into one final mix. And that's the one that y'all heard tonight. Last night's actually was not the final mix. There was a couple of small issues with it, but then we had that cleared up overnight, and we had a final mix sent forward today, and that is the one. Like, this is the one that y'all listen to today. That is the perfect mix. That is the final product, and nicely enough, I also asked Budapest Scoring as well, do I have complete ownership of the rights of this production, and we have all of the rights to this production, including the right to reproduce the copies of it. So that is a very good thing. That means we have full legal rights over this track. So that's an incredibly good thing, because in some instances, sometimes they can reserve, I believe, the actual rights to reproduce copies of it, and they do not. So that was a very good thing. But beyond that, that's kind of how it works. And so the orchestra mix, like the actual soundtrack that y'all are hearing, is just sound. There's no visuals with it or anything. So then I have to take all the videos that were filmed, and I have to pretty much sync them up. And you know, they filmed every single take as well. I have to find one of the good takes, or at least a good angle that they had, and then take that and then try and match it to the music and also sync it up to it as well. I could avoid doing that, but then it wouldn't look like it's matching up, because anyone who's ever played an instrument before, myself included, knows that there's, you know, you have to push certain keys on a trumpet. You have to move the trombone slide to certain positions to get the right kind of notes. There's a load of things that are involved with playing an instrument properly, and anyone with a good eye would see that the video and the audio isn't synced up. So it takes a lot of work to be able to do that, and that's why y'all probably noticed that in the intro there isn't really a lot of the orchestra being shown, because it's really difficult to try and do that down to an exact science. So with that in mind, we could do that. It's just that it would take time, and we would probably throw it on the Discord. What we're actually planning on doing right now is that on a slow day of news, I'm actually just going to publish that whole thing, like that part of the intro, the Armed Forces intro, as an independent video on the channel, and that also is how we're going to be able to put it into Content ID as well, so that way we can go and make sure that people aren't ripping it, because we already have it registered with the US Copyright Board. We just now have to move it on into being registered with YouTube's Content ID. Also, another thing, y'all are not going to believe this, Content ID got it last night. We are the only people who have the ownership of the rights of this. It's a completely original recording, and YouTube came down with Content ID, and once again claimed that the same people they Content ID'd the rough draft for is also theirs as well. This is also theirs as well. So we had to dispute that. That's currently in dispute. That will be blown out of the water very quickly and very easily, because obviously they're not the same. Like, you can always go and listen to the track, and they're clearly not the same. Ours is, you know, of course, unique. It was commissioned by the channel, by Budapest Scoring, with Marcos as the composer, and we own all the rights to it. You know, we have an email to prove that from Budapest scoring. And not only that, we have a individual copyright for it in the Copyright Office. So, it's a fairly clear thing with that. But YouTube Content ID doesn't really understand that, and it just automatically goes around and starts smacking people when it hears something slightly similar. So, with that in mind, we have to clear that up, at least for now, but we are still going to be putting it out in its full form and glory, out as an individual video, and then I probably will put up a full orchestral thing and then just put it on Patreon, because we wouldn't want to put two duplicates of the same song with different views on them, so that would be more like a behind-the-scenes sort of a thing when it's finally done. But I still thank you so much for the support, Cypress96, and I hope that explains that well, because it was so fun to do, and I'm already reaching out. Also, Fel, they did not copyright strike it. They content ID'd. A content ID is just when they say you're using someone else's copyrighted work, but we're not, because it's ours and literally no one else has it or has the rights to it. So it's like, that's obviously, so that's just goofy to even claim that, the content ID system. But we didn't get a copyright strike for it, because a copyright strike is when someone who claims the copyright on something comes forth and says they're using this without my permission, I want them punished for it. And they did not do that. YouTube Content ID just doing what it does as the goofy algorithm it is. It heard the Anchors Away song, which is Anchors Away, because Anchors Away is never different. And then it went, oh, look, that's just like this other guy's Anchors Away. And it's not. It's like they're two totally different tracks. Same song, different tracks, different ownership rights. And so with that, I hope that does address that side of things fairly well. That's always frustrating when they do that. The content ID will be removed, though, because it was removed last time. It will be removed this time. And so that is what it is. But still, thank you so much for the support, Cypress96, and I hope that does address that the best I can, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't have been able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't have been able to also make that 6th track as well. And so a huge thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, just to recap our big piece of breaking news here, as I see several more people asking, have the missiles been fired to Ukraine just yet from the Russian military? And I can confirm that several cruise missiles have entered the airspace in Chernihiv, and they're flying toward Kyiv right now. And once again, the entire country is on red alert, and apparently they're expecting more missiles to start flying. So once again, it's just cruise missiles right now. I see a lot of people coming in. Apparently they've heard misinformation from some other source somewhere else. There are no ICBMs flying, and there's nothing like that happening. So right now, it's simply another routine attack like we've seen in the past. But with that, we are moving on here to our next super chat, and this one goes to Santiago Flores, who's a longtime channel legend and puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Santiago, as well. He said, good evening, and this is for the coffee fund. And if the U.S. gets into a war with Russia, how would it affect the economy? And cheers, and keep up the good work, and gracias.
And I thank you for the support, Santiago Flores and Donata. But beyond that, I would have to say it would certainly affect the trout population without a doubt. That is like a deeply entrenched meme in like the whole like economics world. You know that one, Matthew, where it's like anything happens and someone's like, this will certainly affect the trout population.
Oh, yeah. And also those carp, I'm telling you.
Oh, those carp. Beyond that, if a war started, generally, I believe if we look at the World War II metric, it actually exploded the economy. But there wouldn't really be an economy left by the time we were done with the war with Russia, because if it went all the way until its end, we would be nuked, and they would be nuked. And so really any form of a modern economy would cease to exist by the time the bombs fell. So with that in mind, I would say the economy would boom until we got nuked, and then it would quite literally boom. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, Santiago Flores. But once again, that is going how it went off of World War I and World War II. Generally, those were greatly beneficial to the U.S. economy. Other countries didn't fare that well, though. For example, Britain, after World War I, was relatively broke, and the country didn't really see that much economic success beyond World War I, and World War II was really the death knell, where they started to have to pretty much shrink in size and ability. Same with France for the large part. Those countries were greatly afflicted, but that's generally because they were being directly bombed and were suffering a great deal of damage that wasn't easy to rebuild from at the end of the war. The United States didn't. We just sat here and had unlimited resources, unlimited abilities to produce, and we also had no actual damage happening on the home front. So we were able to just ramp everything up to 10 with a good reason to, and then it just stayed that way after the war, and that's why we were incredibly prosperous after World War I and World War II. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. I also kind of give a little bit of some historical examples about how economies are affected differently. But as long as the United States wasn't taking direct missile impacts in this hypothetical war with Russia and suffering severe damage to any of our industries or any of our services sectors, we would pretty much end up booming economically because of it. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And I thank you so much once again for the incredible support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, we got a good question here from the live chat that we're going to address before we move on to our next super chat. And this one goes to Livix, who said, do you think that they're sending in cruise missiles, meaning Russia sending in cruise missiles to Ukraine, to weaken Kyiv's air defense and then send an ICBM? And I would say probably not an ICBM. That's probably not going to happen tonight. Of course, the cruise missiles are currently flying. I think what's about to happen is the cruise missiles will keep making their way toward the targets, and then Russia is going to follow up with ballistic missiles of some sort. Probably the ones we've seen them launch in the past and not an ICBM. So that's probably what's about to happen. But Enforcer, what is your prediction?
I would have to say this is probably just going to be a large drone and missile attack as usual. It's probably just a larger one than normal, and that's probably it. I'm not really thinking an ICBM is going to be launched or anything crazy is going to be happening tonight. So that would be my general opinion. Usually, the rule on this channel is when you hear the clopping of hooves, think horses, not zebras. It's always going to be the more upfront option, the more normal one, than anything outlandish or wild. Anything that's really outside of the norm rarely happens, so you usually want to lean towards the norm, which would be a large missile and drone attack and nothing really else added on to it. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that this addressed that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to Lord Lathos LSA, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Lord Lathos, for the support. He said, greetings, and I'm worried that Putin is about to do something that we all feel, ... And what are your thoughts?
I would say I don't really think it's going to happen. I think this is once again just threatening and fear-mongering and saber-rattling as usual. However, it's getting closer to happening. I don't want to sound like I'm doing doublespeak here, because we heard that earlier today and we were laughing at that. Like someone was like, yeah, I wouldn't worry about it, but I would worry about it because they could kill everyone. And we were like, what? You're like, dude, you just said two things at the same time.
No, remember, it was. They're not going to fire a nuke because that wouldn't make any sense to fire a nuke. But they do have thousands, so they could fire it at any minute.
Yeah, and it was like, what? and they don't care about killing people, so they could kill everyone. And I'm like, but that's the totally opposite thing of what you just said a second ago. I think they're getting closer to it, but I don't think they're all the way there to where it will happen. That's the best way I can explain it. Like, obviously, it's saber rattling, but with each rattling of the saber, in some instances, it is getting closer to actually happening, where a nuke is dropped on someone somewhere. And with the nuclear doctrine being changed to what it was changed to, because I was able to read it a little bit more today, and it specifically says that a non-nuclear country supported by a nuclear power that is believed to be threatening the sovereignty of the Russian Federation or creating an existential crisis for the state could end up being a target for a nuclear weapon. And that is greatly changing the nuclear doctrine from what it was, because the conventional armed attack could easily provoke an armed nuclear response at any point in history. But now they're trying to make it a lot more clear that in Ukraine's specific instance and situation, that nuclear bombs could fly. That was the whole point of changing the doctrine. And while that sounds like a symbolic thing, and it mostly is, there is still a move, a small one being made there, where it's getting a lot more possible that a nuclear bomb could be fired at Ukraine. So with that in mind, I still don't think it's close to happening, but it's eking its way towards becoming a close to reality sort of a thing. That's the best way I think I can put it. Did that make any sense, Matthew?
I think it made perfect sense, to be honest with you. That's basically what I was saying the other night as well. It's creeping close to the possibility of it, but probably still not likely in the overall picture. But I guess you can say, it's like saying, like, for example, if the odds of a nuclear weapon being fired is like 1%, and it creeps forward to 2%, well, yeah, it became more likely, but not by much. And that's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm glad it made sense, because when I was saying it, I was like, I don't even know if this is making sense at all right now, how I'm saying this. It sounds like double speak or something like that. But also, I just saw some people say this, and oh God, I got to clear this up. Someone said, we need the current president out of here before he starts World War III. Oh my God. Oh, I guess you're not listening to the news.
They should have moved faster, people. It's like he finally did what was supposed to be done, months and months and months ago. He's not suddenly starting World War III. He's doing finally what he should have done ages ago. So, to say that he's starting something is silly.
Yeah, and also, to say that like he's the only one there, they said today that he was on a phone call with the incoming president, the president-elect, as some would call him, and he was the guy who was like, yeah, that's a great idea. I actually want to do that. Let's do it. And then that with both of them agreeing in concurrence, they then gave the approval for the ATACMS to be used by the Ukrainians in Russia, and also for anti-personnel mines to be given to the Ukrainians as well. If you are if you were watching on Twitter and you're listening to the tabloids, you're not going to know what's going on. You need to listen to official government statements. I know some people are about to say that's how the mole people control you, but that's like loony talk right there. You need to listen to the official government statements because, one, just to make this very clear, the incoming president-elect has not tweeted anything anti-Ukrainian for like months. Well, from what I've seen, I checked today. It was like weeks or months. There was nothing even close to it. He's made no comment on this, and the only comment we have about this situation is coming from the office of the President of the United States, of the current president right now, not the one that's coming in January. And he said that he was on a phone call today with the incoming president-elect, and together they both discussed the situation in Ukraine and came to a joint conclusion that the allowance of Ukraine to use American weapons for deep strikes into Russia and the provisions of anti-personnel mines to Ukraine was a prudent and smart decision given the circumstances. And that's why the permissions were given. It is, like we were saying last night, a part of a continuum of foreign policy. While the foreign policy is a little bit different under the incoming president-elect, like we've been saying, and like many people are going to be finding out, it's not really that much different than the current sitting president. And it's going to pretty much be going the exact same way, or honestly, at this point, it may even escalate quicker. And that's what we're understanding. So if you're listening to let me just be honest. If you're listening to CNN or Fox or Elon or someone, you're not going to be getting the real picture. They're just running their mouths. You need to listen to the government statements because the government statements are letting you know what's actually going on. Don't get your comments from some random Joe Blow off the street. Go get them from the government because regardless whether you think the government lies or not, they don't lie about having phone calls with each other and things like that publicly. That's not something they lie on. So with that, I hope that kind of covers that well, because once again, you got to get your statements from the government sources. Otherwise, you're just not going to know what's going on. You're going to just, be in the dark really and believing something that isn't actually the case. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, given the situation. It's annoying to me. Also, I see some people saying the government never lies and stuff like that. And some people are saying it's slightly political. The only reason I'm having to go into this right now is because there's an insane dissonance in between what people are thinking is happening and what's actually happening. And we've been saying it for a while now. Honestly, we've been saying it for a year because people have been asking if the president-elect, who's the president-elect right now, got elected, is the war in Ukraine going to end? And we were like, nah, honestly, foreign policy largely stays the same from president to president, regardless of their stance. And while they can say one thing publicly, they're all going to end up pretty much doing the same thing because it only makes sense. And so it's happening now, exactly as we drew it up. Which Matthew gets that joke. It's happening as we drew it up, and it's how it is. Like, I'm not trying to be biased in condemning the current president or the incoming one or praising either of them unfairly. This is just how it works, and I want folks to try and know that. I just don't like it when people are listening to the tabloid stuff out there, and they're hearing that the current president is starting World War III unilaterally just to screw over the incoming one, and the other one, the incoming president, is trying to start a war while the current president isn't. Like, that stuff is just totally untrue. They're working in unison at this point. They're getting in phone calls to make sure that the decisions of the current president are going to exist in a continuum with the incoming president, because that's how it's always worked in this republic, and it will never change. And so with that, I hope that...
Just like we drew it up.
Just like we drew it up, Jack. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
But anyways, moving on to our next one here, we have a super chat which is going to go to GunFox61, the Medic Fox, the channel legend. And he puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, GunFox, as always, for that support. He said, 11/20/284, Roman General Diocletian is proclaimed emperor by the armies of the East and West after the death of Carinus at the Battle of Margus. And in 1945, the Nuremberg war trials began. And in 1815, the Second Treaty of Paris. And question from the chat.
And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, thank you for sharing a day in a history. Now, I want to show you all something that is pretty cool about Diocletian, who was one of the Roman emperors of old, the GunFox61 mentioned right there in the year of 284. He built the Baths of Diocletian. And let me see if I can show y'all at least what's standing there today. This is what's standing there today, but it's not at all the baths that used to exist. Baths in Rome were a public thing. It was a public utility that was provided by the state. So it was either provided by the Republic or the Empire. But nevertheless, this was during the time of the Roman Empire, and actually during the times of the latter end of the Roman Empire, almost right before Rome got sacked. And then, let's see, it would have been Constantine I moved the capital of Rome from, the Roman Empire from Rome and over into Constantinople, which is now known as Istanbul, which would then be the capital of the Roman Empire until the split into the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire, and then Constantinople would still remain the capital of the Roman Empire until its collapse in the 1400s at the hands of the Ottomans. But nevertheless, the Diocletian baths are probably one of the most impressive things built under the reign of Diocletian. This is a cross-section that was made in 1880 of what the baths probably looked like when they actually existed, and it is a really impressive kind of a illustration. Like, I've always been captivated by the great engineering, civil engineering works of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire honestly did better with civil engineering works because the technology had greatly progressed by that time. But the stuff was truly incredible. Like, the scale of this thing was massive. And from what we know, this isn't that far off from being close to what it would have looked like. Now, in a building like this is kind of normally seen. Like, this area here in the center that is in this illustration, it's about the same size as the terminus at Union Station in Washington, D.C. So in a modern day scale, it's not really that impressive because we build stuff like this quite often, or we have, at least about 100 years ago. So, but still, at the time, this was a true work of engineering. This was pushing the civil engineering and architectural limits to the max, and it was a marvel of engineering. This is what I always know Diocletian for whenever anyone brings him up, are the baths of Diocletian, which are just this amazing architectural feat. Like, if I know anything about Rome, I don't really know a lot about their military history, except for in some instances like the Punic Wars and the Gallic Wars, and then also the wars on the British Islands. Those are some things I will know about Roman history on the combat side of things, but the thing I've always focused on is the civil engineering and architectural side of things, which is always impressive and really was a big cornerstone of what modern federal or new federal architecture looks like in the United States, which is largely based off of the Greco-Roman styles of antiquity, which is always a beautiful design. I think it's timeless. But another thing that's also really interesting about this, to share with y'all another interesting fact and rabbit hole about the Diocletian baths, is that there is one thing that is incorrect about these paintings. The entire outside is unpainted marble. Matthew, did you actually know this? But the idea that Roman buildings were always this stoic marble color, just raw natural marble, is untrue. And actually a lot of their statues and buildings were painted up very decoratively pretty much throughout the entire history of the Republic and the Empire.
I actually didn't know that. I thought it was the actual raw marble, so that's news to me.
Yeah, and in the modern day, what's cool is that they've actually found on a lot of these older marble statues from the Roman Empire and the Republic paint pigments, and they're so small and non-existent on these statues at this point. You have to be able to analyze their composition, at least on the surface level, microscopically, to be able to see the paint pigments. But they were able to see that pretty much everything was painted. Most of the buildings in the Roman Forum inside of Rome actually had paint, and a large amount of it on their exteriors, and so did the statues as well. So these statues here of these people standing here, like right here, these were not raw marble. They were actually painted to look like a lifelike figure. And so people have actually recreated what this would have looked like. And let me see here if I can get a painted Roman statue. Let me just type that in and see if we can get y'all an example of what it probably would have looked like. And let's see here. Let me go see if I can find the good example.
Also, by the way, remember, I can't see it. I'm having to do like remote viewing over here to get a gist of what you're talking about, so I can't see anything.
Let me see if I can reconnect your live thing here really quickly, because it's really impressive stuff, and I've completely forgot that you cannot see the stuff. Can you see it now?
Let's see. Nope, no luck. I think it's going to be broken all night. Also,
Dang.
Discord asked me, how'd the stream go? I put terribly. The stream was black, it said.
Dang, that sucks. I was thinking you could see this the whole time because, the video's always on. But to show y'all this, so that way y'all in the audience could see it, although Matthew's also dealing with the delay y'all have at this point, this is what a painted statue would have looked like, at least at its roughest, because this is the original marble, at least bust of Caligula that you'll see over here. This is what they believe, based off of the pigments that they were able to find inside of the marble work, that the real bust of Caligula would have looked like during the time that it was actually made. It would have been properly painted up to have a lifelike look and appearance, and it would have pretty much looked like the person itself. Pretty cool when you think about that, because it completely changes the way that people look at old Roman architecture. It's no longer this stoic marble color. It's actually a very colorful and lifelike kind of a representation. And such things can even be said and seen at the basic levels. Like, for example, let me see if I can find you all this. And let me see if I can find this really quickly. The Thermopolium, which is a version of a Roman fast food, fast food restaurant. These were the first fast food restaurants in the world. Fast food is nothing new to the modern world. It's actually something that's been going on for thousands of years, because a quick but hot and ready meal, like Little Caesar's Pizza, no joke, is always a very interesting thing to trace, because people have never really had the time to cook domestically at home. Back in the Middle Ages, no one really cooked at home. Ovens were too expensive, and so there were communal ovens that would bake the bread for the entire town, or would cook food for them at the tavern in the inn, because the tavern in the inn were able to compile enough wealth into one place to be able to afford an oven or some sort of cooking utensils to be able to properly cook meals. And people would go to the tavern, or they would go to the communal ovens, and they would get their bread and they would get their meat. But beyond that, that was also something that was done in ancient Rome. And these little thermopoliums would provide food to working folks who were coming home or going to work or returning home, or sometimes just for your simple afternoon fun. People would gamble in here. People would sit around and chit chat. These are like your modern day McDonald's / Starbucks kind of a deals at the time. And you can actually see a well-preserved example here in Pompeii of the paintwork that would have existed inside of these buildings. Because once again, nothing was that stoic marble color that a lot of people think it was. It was incredibly colorful. And the people of ancient Rome even had a concept of advertising as well, because it's been seen that carved in some of the walls around Pompeii and even other ancient cities that have been unearthed, like ancient Ostia just outside of Rome, that there are inscriptions on the walls, and when you actually translate them, they are slogans for the restaurants, like or like sales ideas. Like there would be something like buy buy two glasses of wine, get the third one like half off. They actually had stuff like that inscribed in the walls. So they were doing discounts and coupons pretty much even in antiquity, which is a cool thing to think, because it shows how little humanity has changed. Our technology has changed, our fashion has changed, even our ideals have changed, but at the very basic level of consumerism, or how people would live their lives materialistically, it has hardly changed a single iota. It's almost the same thing it was back then, just with far more technology and a greater removal from the nature which we come from, which is a pretty interesting thing to think about. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well, Gunfox61, to go into a massive rabbit hole on Rome, because it's an incredibly interesting thing to talk about and think about, that it was a lot like this. And another thing that also would be cool, and I hate that, Matthew, you can't see any of this, and it's all like a huge amount of lag that you're pretty much having to deal with, but in Rome, right around here, there is something very interesting to talk about. And let me see if I can find it, because I want to try and find it with the naked eye really quickly. It's naked. No, I'm just kidding. But let me see here. I think this is it. Yep, this is it. So down here in southern Rome, well, this used to be southern Rome back in the day when ancient Rome existed. And ancient Rome only got to be about 1 million people in size. It was the largest city in the ancient world, but still nowhere close to being a massive city in the modern day. But nevertheless, Rome was a very consumerist-based kind of a city. It was literally like a modern one, with what people wanted and what people got, and it coming from literally all of the known world. And olive oil was something that people craved back in the day. It was a lot like, let me try and think of something in the modern day that would be kind of like a consumer.
It's like butter in Russia under this horrible economy.
Yeah, or like, or over here it would be like an avocado. It was something that was highly sought after and they really wanted. So what would happen is that olives really weren't grown in Italy. or at least a lot, and they weren't the best quality. A lot of the olives at the time were actually grown in Spain, down here in the southern coast area near to Granada. The city of Granada, just along the Spanish coast. And so they would grow the olives there, they would press them, they would put them into giant vats, and these vats were huge. They would load them aboard sailing ships, and these sailing ships would take the arduous journey from southern Spain all the way around the coast of Spain, through France, and around Italy until they made it to the ancient port of Ostia in Rome. And when you go to the ancient port of Ostia, which is right here, you can actually still see the ports and where they actually would store these vats for transportation further up the Tiber River and on up into Rome. And when they would travel up the river to Rome, they would take mules, they would pretty much hook them up to a barge, and they would drag the barge up the river with the mules up into Rome itself. They would then be stored in Rome until the vats were completely used. Also, by the way, at some points, some of the olive oil would actually be purchased by the state. It was a form of government welfare at the time. So you would be allotted a certain amount of bread, a certain amount of meat, and a certain amount of olive oil every single day if you were one of the poor living in Rome. And it was a part of your government welfare program at the time. And so then, once the olive oil was used up, they would transport all of the vats to southern Rome, well, to the very south of the city, beyond the Pomerium, which was the wall that existed at the time that protected the city. And then they would take the pots, they would crush them up into little pieces, and they would go and put them up in a mound. And for hundreds of years, this mound grew. And it grew into a mountain. It's called the Monte Testaccio. Well, actually, let me make sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. It is called the Monte Testaccio inside of southern Rome. It's still there to this day. And if you go up there onto this mountain, you can still see the broken pieces of clay and porcelain that made up the vats that would transport the olive oil from Spain to Rome. They're still there to this day, and the entire hill is made up of them, which is really crazy to think about. It's the probably most famous and well-known landfill from ancient times. It's the only one, I believe, that still really exists at this scale these days, and it's really impressive to see that. And there, once again, you can see all of the smashed up pieces of these vats that were transported all the way from Spain to Rome as a part of kind of their consumer economy back in the day. So with that, I hope that does give the most epic rabbit hole ever to a most random piece of history about Diocletian finally becoming emperor, because there's a load of cool things to talk about with what goes on in ancient Rome, or really in any society in any period of history. I just love focusing on the consumer side of things, because while you all know that I talk about war a great deal, and war is a certainly massive moving mechanism of humanity and its history, still, there is so much more to be learned and researched about ancient peoples, or just people from other eras, and how they lived, what they consumed, and things such as that. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Gunfox61. I hope that does address that rabbit hole incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and just to keep everybody up to date with the current breaking news that we're getting out of Ukraine about the ongoing attack, apparently the cruise missiles have begun hitting targets, and also Ukrainian air defense is taking down a pretty good number of those cruise missiles as they're coming in. And we also are aware that apparently Tu-95s are involved in the attack, and we're not really aware of what is being fired off from the Black Sea, if anything. But one interesting note that was actually sent in by a viewer on Twitter, this is a bit of a side note actually, because I don't think this is correlated with the current attack on Ukraine, but we just saw the taking off of the Snoop 29, which is a Boeing WC-135R, which is a specialized plane from the U.S. Air Force, which is designed to basically sniff out and collect samples from the atmosphere for detecting and identifying nuclear explosions. That just took off, and apparently it is heading to an undisclosed location somewhere, and we're not really sure where it's heading, but it has taken off from its home base, and it's heading out to some location. So I'm not sure what that is about. That is a bit of an unusual movement by that aircraft, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. But also, real quick, Enforcer, can you stall for just a moment so I can check some breaking news here?
Yes, we can stall, and stall we shall. Stall is a very interesting sort of a word, because it actually has existed before the invention of the aeroplane. Stall actually means that a vehicle pretty much comes to a stop and pretty much is unable to move itself by force out of its period of lack of motion. Stall is actually used, I believe, in sailing circles, if I remember correctly, the definition of stall. And it's a very interesting word for that reason, because stall in that form has been around for at least hundreds of years in the English language. But Matthew, what more do we have?
So nothing new. I was checking another claim real quick that someone sent me, but I don't think that one quite snuffed out, so we can't really report on that one right now. But the news here about the nuke-sniffing plane taking off, that sounds like one of those clickbait titles that you'll hear coming from a prepper channel or
All the
something like
bombers are
that.
flying.
Yeah, it sounds like that, but actually that is a bit of an unusual movement by that very specialized plane. And of course, it's designed to go up in the atmosphere and detect whether or not the traces of a nuclear explosion have occurred somewhere around the world. So I'm not sure what's up with that. That is unusual. But anyways, we are moving on here from that and moving back into our next super chat. And this one is going to go to none other than Butchie the Crouton, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Butchie, for the support. And I don't see a comment attached to it, but there was a very good super sticker of the YouTube creature having some Transformer armor, it looked like. And I like that one very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, and I gotta thank you for throwing in that little creature, Butchie777. And I gotta say, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. Can I get an amen and a hallelujah? Amen and a hallelujah. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Miller Pebble, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Miller. They said, will we see the Russian Sarmat Lada car parade by Saturday? LOL.
We probably...
Sarmat, Washington.
Nah, Washington, Washington, and then they do this, and then they get in their freaking car and wreck into a bus or something. And we probably will see it, maybe. I don't know what happened to that car. I think it actually got wrecked a little while ago. But if it's still around, I think we'll see it.
Yeah, it got wrecked, man. It went off into and careened into a ditch. Luckily, that wasn't a real nuke, or they would have screwed us all over.
Man, they would have killed us all, I believe. Let's see here. I want to see if I can find this information that you are putting out on the Twitter. Let's see here.
Are you looking for the nuke sniffer information?
Yes, I'm looking for the sniffer, please.
I have not reposted that, but I can give you the source if you want to see it.
Sure, yes, let us see. I would like to see.
Let me go to the notifications tab, yes, and what this is. So go to our notifications tab. I don't want to repost this right off the bat because I'm not sure exactly where this came from, like what user reposted those. By the way, if you posted that and you're the user I'm talking about, and not trying to offend you or anything like that, but we have to be very careful what we repost, because if we repost something and it turns out to be a little sketchy, then people get really upset with us, and we can't have that. But to Enforcer, check out the bell tab and you'll see it there. It's about 33 minutes ago.
33 minutes ago, блядь. Yes, like that. Let's see here. This seems a little interesting. Yes. Well, this thing take off from Omaha and Nebraska, blade. This could just be flying around in America to fly, you know?
I don't think those things regularly fly around on a routine basis.
Well, I actually don't know a lot about their flight patterns to know, but one thing I would say, though, is I don't think you'll be smelling a nuclear bomb blowing up from Lincoln, Nebraska, blade. Like, I think that's a little too far into America to be like... Yes, a nuclear bomb blew up. We should be scared. Like, I think they have to be kind of closer to where it happened, I believe, if I'm correct. Not like on it.
It looked like it was heading out toward the direction of California, maybe, based on the flight path, but I don't really know where it's landing. It could be landing anywhere, and it could be simply a rotation for the thing, but considering the fact it took off from its home base, heading somewhere, and typically, from my understanding, they don't just fly around just to fly around for the hell of it. It seems like maybe it might be connected to maybe taking a precaution to detect a nuclear explosion, but I don't know.
Let's see here. Let me go pull up the WC-135, bleed, and let's get some information on this thing. Well, you know, and we act like we cannot get any information, Blade. Let's take a look. Let's see. Its mission is to collect samples from the atmosphere for the purpose of detecting and identifying nuclear explosions. It also is informally referred to as the Weatherbird, or the Sniffer, by workers on the program and international media, respectively. But we want to know about its operational history. Let's see. The aircraft took...
Also, Melanie said they can detect isotopes worldwide within a couple of days. And when the Enforcer said that, I was going to say, I think I disagree. I don't know enough to really go into detail about the plane, but I think that you can detect those isotopes around the world pretty much. It would take it, like you said, probably like 48 hours to reach the plane if it was over here in the USA, but they can detect it. Because remember, I don't know how Kodak detected the nuclear explosions. I think that might have been a little bit different, but you can detect it far away.
And let's see here. Apparently, I am wrong. I will have to eat my foot on that one, bullet. Because I suppose that would be correct. But still, let's see. Replace the 2 aircraft. Let's see. In November 2020. During his 50. Let's see here. 2022. Please main test flight. So they had a new one that was actually introduced recently. By collecting particulate and from accessible regions of the atmosphere. The information collected by the aircraft is utilized. So it sounds to me like they actually fly a pretty good bit because they're collecting data. It seems almost constantly at this point, at least according to what Wikipedia is saying about them. So let's see here. Like, the WC-135B aircraft flew 25 sorties in 1975, in 1979, to try and ascertain whether a double flash in the South Atlantic that was detected by a Vela satellite was a nuclear weapons test. However, the result was inconclusive. Let's see, that was actually a sniffing incident. So, let's see here.
That was a sniffing incident.
A little sniffing.
Oh, man. I know some other sniffing incidents, very high-profile sniffing incidents.
I know of some low-profile sniffing incidents.
That's a snorting incident.
Oh, let's see. Let's see. One of them had been deployed from Offutt Air Force Base to Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. From there, it assisted in detecting radioactive materials in the atmosphere around Japan for the Fukushima nuclear disaster. But let's see here. It was reported it had been deployed. It was conjectured that this came in response to several reports of anomalous levels of iodine-131 coming from the Norwegian-Russian border. So it looks like there are notable moments of interest. All of them were dealing with sniffing incidents where they would sniff. There are some higher-level instances of that do not deal with the aircraft itself. But I would have to say, I'm going to have to do some more research on this thing. There's just not a lot of information on it. Let's actually go to the Air Force website. They probably have to have some information on it. Let's see.
It's the KC-1. What's the code on the aircraft again? KC what?
The WC-135.
Oh, WC-135. Let's see. How often is the WC-135 deployed? Let's see.
Well, better yet, how often does it fly?
So it says here that the WC-135, known as the Constant Phoenix, or nuke sniffer, as we know, it's deployed only as needed, usually in response to potential nuclear threats or incidents, meaning it does not have a set deployment schedule and may be sent out only on occasion, particularly when there are major concerns about nuclear activity in a specific region. So, based on that information, I would take an assumption here that plane took off from its home base, probably heading out to Europe. Of course, it's taking a flight path over the United States, and it looks like it's heading out toward California, and that might be where the thing is actually heading to basically start running sorties in Europe to monitor the situation. Because I see here that apparently in 1986, multiple WC-135Bs were deployed to Europe to help monitor the air in Europe after the Chernobyl disaster, and it had to go to the region to start sniffing it out. So I think the thing might be heading over to Europe.
Maybe. But still, one thing I did read on the Wikipedia page here, and this was interesting, is that they said that one of them was retired. This one here, in November 2020, WC-135C, tail number 62-3582, was retired during a ceremony at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, where that one just took off from a moment ago that we were looking at. During its 56-year career, it amassed 29,680 flight hours and 72,251 landings. Like, let's think about that. There could not have been, in 56 years, 72,251 incidents of nukes going off. There's never even been that many nuclear tests or nuclear disasters in the history of the world. So it's kind of shooting against the odds that this thing is taking off with purpose at this point, because with it landing 72,251 times, one would have to assume that every single time it took off in those scenarios where it then landed, it couldn't have been taking off simply for the fact that something had happened in the world with a nuclear weapon, or was going to happen.
Let's see here. Also, by the way, I'm going to track the thing live on flight radar because we have the ability to do that. So let's take a look and see where this thing actually is right now at the moment. Let's see. It took off from Lincoln, Nebraska. What is that? Offutt Air Force Base, I think?
Yes. Well, actually, I don't think it took off from Lincoln. I think it was in Omaha. And let me see here.
Oh, yeah. You're right. I was looking at the wrong part of the map. It came up from Omaha. So let's see here. says the Omaha Epley airfield. But that's not where it took off from. That's just the vicinity of it. It looks like it's flying currently across Colorado. It's about to go over Colorado Springs, and it is heading down sort of toward the direction of the bottom part of California, maybe towards San Diego. And it will be passing through, if it doesn't land in Colorado, it'll pass over Nevada and then head on to California, it looks like.
Oh, look, we can actually see all the Doomsday planes and sniffers if you go down to the airfield off it. It's south of Lincoln, by the way. Well, not Lincoln. It's south of Omaha, Nebraska. If you go towards the southern side, you will see it. And if you look it down there on the map, you will see all of the Doomsday planes sitting out there, the 747s, and you will see the WC-135 sniffers as well.
Oh, yeah. I can see those on my end as well. I hate I can't see the stream on Discord, but I'm looking at it on my end on Flight Radar, so I do see that as well. So very interesting. Like, where's your best guess, Enforcer? Where do you think the Snoop 29 is going? Is it heading out to California to be deployed to Europe, or is it simply being moved around for some other like administrative purpose?
Yeah, it's probably being moved around for an administrative purpose. But if it was going anywhere out of the country, considering it's flying towards California, it would be a lot shorter of a flight if they were planning on sending it to Europe for it to just fly over the Atlantic to the UK to an airfield there. If it's flying west, it probably is going to fly all the way out to Guam or Alaska, most likely at some point.
Interesting. So we'll have to see whether where this thing actually ends up going tomorrow, and we'll have to. I'm not a betting person, but I'm going to bet that thing is actually going to be heading out to Europe, probably heading to California first, and then heading out to Europe. That's my guess.
Maybe, possibly. But with that, I hope we've covered that news the best we can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also we are going through lag out of the blue, so let me close down maybe this Flight Radar thing right here and try to get rid of that, and maybe that'll help clear it up or something. But anyway, no, it's a Discord problem. Never mind. But moving on to our next super chat, this one goes to Marion Deemer, who puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout out to Marion Deemer, who's a longtime channel legend, and we appreciate that support very much. And they said simply, Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukrainian. Thank you so much for the support, Marion Deemer, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to say that still 1,001 days later. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Butchie the Crouton, who puts in a $20 donation. And Butchie is another channel legend as well. And huge shout out to Butchie for the support. They said, for the pizza, coffee, and dog treats fun, and please take a succulent live chat in LSA and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And let me make sure to go grab that live chat out of the, let's see here. There we go. And I thank you so much for the support, Butchie the Crouton, for the pizza, coffee, and dog treats fun. And also, we will make sure to take that succulent live chat meal. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for support. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army and Slow. But Matthew, what do we got for that live chat? We got something juicy? Wow, that audio quality sure is juicy. I think Discord's quitting on us. Hopefully that can be fixed by simply just restarting the call. Let's find out. Hello? 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 He's not in the call yet, folks. We gotta wait for a second. He's eventually going to be back in the call. Oh, God bless his soul. Hello?
Oh, dear Lord, Discord's really screwing up. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Can you see my screen share?
Yes, I can actually see your screen share now, so that's an improvement at least.
Amazing. Well, with that, Matthew, what have we got for a live chat?
Oh, okay, live chat question. So let me scroll up here and grab that live chat question. Come on, Discord, work with me, please. But anyways, the live chat question here goes to Howard Turgell. He said, if Russia wanted to, could Russia fire an ICBM from North Korean territory?
Well, technically they could. They probably wouldn't want to, though. They probably want to fire it from inside of Russia. But technically, yes, they could possibly do that if they were able to negotiate that with the North Koreans. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat well. And thank you once again for sponsoring that live chat, Butchie the Crouton, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, ZM said in the live chat, bro, the deep state's always messing around in Enforcer Mass Discord. Man, the deep state has nothing to do with this one. It's just Discord being Discord at this point. I guess that's why they call it Discord. It causes trouble. But anyways, moving on here to our next one. This one goes to Adam McLean, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Adam, as always, for supporting the channel, and we appreciate it very much. He said, because this channel has always been about a lot more than just Ukrainian war news.
And I thank you so much for the support, Adam McLean. And I would agree. It has always been about more than just Ukrainian war news. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, to keep the amazing LSA alive. Because that's really what this channel is about. It's not about the war that everyone's been fighting on the way. It's about the friends we've made along the way that really matter. With that, thank you so much once again. I hope that is addressed the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
In our next one here goes to Michael Lotz, who puts in a 14. And thank you very much, Michael, for the support as well. And that super chat also, we appreciate it. He said, I live in Toronto, Canada. And can you provide your thoughts on how unprepared the Canadian military is regarding the melting Arctic and potential Russian invasion through that region?
Oh, yeah, Russian invasion in that region. That wouldn't happen. That land's inhospitable. Even if the ice caps melted, it's inhospitable, and there's no roads up there to support any armed operations on, so they would literally have to trudge through swamp and hell to get to anything that would matter in Canada. Largely, Canada's safe because it's population-wise and industrially isolated from pretty much the rest of the country. Most of it's down in this area, in between Montreal and Toronto. So for that reason, I would not worry about that at all. I don't think Canada's at risk or militarily unprepared. And also on top of that, the United States and Canada, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not for sure on this one, are both members of NATO. And so for that reason, Canada could easily rely on the U.S. military to help it out in the event of an invasion. And I'm pretty sure at that point, no one would even make an argument that that's Canada's war, not ours, because that would literally be on our continent. And probably things have gone very badly at that point if they were attempting an invasion of northern Canada in the Arctic. But beyond that, I would say that that is militarily infeasible due to the difficulty of the terrain, the vastness of the terrain. Just to get an idea here, to get to anywhere populated, which would be somewhere around Vancouver, honestly, you would have to trudge through 1,412 miles of largely inhospitable and uninhabitable land to be able to make it into a major population center, meaning that an offensive effort like that would have supply lines so long it would quite literally be impossible to pull that off. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Susan Janowski, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Susan, very much. And she said, keep up the vital news.
And thank you so much, Susan Janowski, for enjoying this news and wanting us to keep up the vital news, because I have to say that after my quick little foray into mainstream news today, I'm very happy that we're on here covering the news, because I don't think there would be real news out there otherwise if we weren't covering it. That isn't to inflate our own ego. That's honestly just the truth at this point, and that's a very sad truth, because we're beating a multi-million-dollar news company just being two people on some computers. Very sad.
We want real news. We don't want fake news. If you'll give us the chance, we'll prove you.
I have to thank the President of the United States for giving us the opportunity, the chance to have real news, long-lasting news. Because if it was not for that, we would not be here right now. And I also have to give a massive thank you to everyone who's been watching this channel for so long. It means a great deal to us for y'all to give us the chance to
the chance
to tell all of y'all the news. But still, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Margaret D. Velden. Almost butchered your last name there, but thank you very much, Margaret, for that $10 donation, and we appreciate it. They said, where was Wagner HQ?
Wagner HQ was a very transient kind of thing. Never really existed in one spot. We generally believe that it was somewhere near Bakhmut for a while, and then it moved from Bakhmut to just north of Mazir, I believe, if I remember correctly. It was somewhere around here, up in the fringes of this area, and then it ceased to exist. And so I think that's where the headquarters were. There was also a headquarters in St. Petersburg. That was like their corporate office, but that one was never really used. It was just kind of like an official corporate office, but never really was like their actual like office of command, I guess you could say. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Boulder Boy, who puts in a $10 donation. And like Pinocchio once said, am I a real boy now, Papa? And this is Boulder Boy. And he said, here is a $10.01 donation for day 1001. And as you learned, 1001 is a palindrome.
And it's a palindrome. What do you mean? I don't. What does that word
Or a
mean?
palindrome. Rootin' tootin' Vladimir Putin.
Let's see here. Oh, it is. I literally heard about that word like a week ago now that I saw the actual word and the explanation. I remember seeing that someone was like, you see, Hannah's the same front and back. It's a palindrome. And then I forgot about it, like in between then and now. But beyond that, I thank you for the support. I thank you for helping this channel to keep on running and pointing that out because day 1001 certainly is. It's really creepy. Get it away from me. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Gator, who puts in a $10 donation. And a huge shout to you, Gator, for the support.
Oh.
And they said hit the like button.
Hit the like button, folks. I got to give a big shout out to Gator for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and wanting folks to hit the like button because y'all sure as hell are. We've got about 3,600 likes in this stream, and that's a pretty high number. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, and see you later, Gator. And Matthew, what do we got for the next one?
So the next one goes to Robin Donovan, who puts in a 10 and says, thank you for keeping us updated and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying us, keeping you updated, because that's what we live for here. Quite literally, that's pretty much all we do. We exist to give y'all news. But I still thank you so much once again for support and the kind words, because it really does mean a great deal to us. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to None of Your Beeswax, who puts in a 10 and says, I still say that we need an LSA unit patch featuring the Marmot.
We have been thinking about that for a while. There's so many ideas that we have because considering that we own the full rights to the Armed Forces intro, for some reason that took me a minute to think of the name of the actual title of that song, but considering that we own the full rights to it, we actually have a bit of an idea that has been knocked around yesterday on stream and a little bit today by me, to actually do a vinyl record release of the Armed Forces medley that we made for the channel and make it to where it's on a vinyl, which I think would be really cool. And like Matthew was the one who came up with that idea, but once I heard it, I was like, write that down. And I was like, that is actually really cool. As we did that, I think that'd be neat. But a patch with the Marmot on it would also be sick as well. We just got to eventually figure out which one we're going to do and in what order, and then start putting them out, because I have a feeling that a lot of people would love to see an LSA flag re-release. A lot of people would like to see an LSA patch with the Marmot on it, and a lot of people probably would like to see the Armed Forces medley be put out as a vinyl, which would be pretty cool as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
Oh, yes, indeed. And the next one here goes to Jason Carpenter, who puts in a 5 and says, those storm shadows got intercepted all right by some buildings.
Yeah, I have to say, they really got intercepted when they hit the ground, and it was really hard and really fast, and I think it was really a big Russian success, a success story even. It's like from Crackhead to CEO, the story of brilliance, or something like that. You know, I think I've heard that one before, but still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on here to our next super chat. This one's going to go to Herpaderp NV, who puts in a 5. And also, real quick, by the way, Avari Mandabrata said, I think I suggested the vinyl album. I think you might have, Avari. I think I stole your idea,
You
actually.
stole it?
Avari was like, hey, wait a minute, man. I want my credit. So the credit does go to Avari, actually. I think I took the idea from him. So I'm giving him his due credit right now.
Did you say cred? Dude, I've got to do the thing, man. Sit down. You didn't let me show my creds. Like, it's just the thing.
Hey, that's what that other guy, that hot dog man, said. You didn't let me show my creds, and they give him the middle finger. He said, "Oh, creds don't mean anything." I'm sorry.
Man, they said creds don't mean shit, man. Get out of here. And then he just had to walk away.
Man, I pity the fool.
Dude, he was like, "Let me show you my creds," and he made up like the Weenie Hut Juniors like pass or something. It's like there's no such thing as like creds in the press. Like who the hell's the office that gives you press credentials? There's not one in America. It's like, what creds does this guy have? Oh, let me pull up my failing YouTube channel. That's a cred. It's like, no, that's a minus. Like, that's not a cred. That's a minus.
That's a zonk on that one.
Yeah, it's like, that ain't getting you in, buddy. They're going to look at your viewership and go, he doesn't even belong in a seat in this convention. He needs to pay for one at that point. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one. Sorry, by the way, if already made a browse, the credit was not given where credit is due. Because if you were the one who came up with the vinyl idea, that was a sick idea. Massive shout out and credit for that. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one here goes to, let's see here. let's see here. I think I was on Herb Derp NV. Herb Derp NV put in that 5, by the way. I'm going back to it. And thank you very much, Herb Derp, for the support. And they said it seems like the Aegis Ashore sites in Poland or Romania could intercept a Russian ICBM since the SM-3 missile has both inner and extra-atmospheric capability.
Now, let me check that really quickly. You know, let me check that really quickly. Look at this. This was launched from the USS Lake Erie. They said, "Don't give up the ship." That's what Hot Dog Man, whenever he looks at his channel, he says, "Aw, man, don't give up the shit." And like, so he really relates to that one. But beyond that, though, the USS Lake Erie is a Ticonderoga. I knew it because the Ticonderoga is baller. But beyond that, let's see. The SM-3 has also been employed in an anti-satellite capacity against a satellite at the lower end of Earth orbit. That is incredibly cool. That is really cool, actually. I did not know that. Let's see. The unit cost, holy moly, $9 to $25 million.
That's cheap.
Maybe. I mean, honestly, for an exo-atmospheric missile that can intercept things in low Earth orbit, it's like, that is kind of cheap, I guess. Like, you're just carrying around small Falcon 9s on board the Ticonderoga, so, you know, I guess it's not that bad. But beyond that, let's see here.
Also, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Block 2A was involved in the manufacturing of this one.
That's interesting. Oh, wait a minute, no, sorry, Mandy, that's a correction there. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries produced the Block 2A variant of the missile. It wasn't Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Block 2A, the company that produced the missile. Man,
I was about to say, it's oddly weird for a company name to be Block 2A. That was a very interesting naming.
Man, a big shout out to Boeing 737 for producing the Boeing 757. Like,
yeah, man. You know, that is reproducing new planes out here. It's a little bit graphic.
But now I understand, Matthew, really quickly, why the cost of this thing is high. The operational range of just a Block 1A and B was 560 to 745 miles. So this thing is firing across multiple states worth of territory to hit a target. And then the Block 2A can actually reach out to, let's see here. It doesn't give it in miles, it only gives it in metrics, but about 1,200 kilometers, which would be equivalent to about 1,000 miles or 900 miles or so. So this thing has a considerable range to it. So no wonder these things are expensive. I guess, honestly, U.S. warships could actually probably intercept an ICBM if they were in the right place at the right time. And I believe the Aegis, well, I don't believe, the Aegis probably would be able to intercept ICBMs, at least in the early phase of their launch, if they're in the right place at the right time. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, because I need to look into that a little bit more. I need to look into that a lot more, actually. But still, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one here goes to Vic the Red, who puts in a 10, and thank you very much, Vic, for that support. He said, do you think Putler will fall out of a window anytime soon?
Oh, no. If anyone's going to be falling out of a window last, it probably would be him, because he's the window falling chief. Like, he's the one who gets to decide who falls out of the windows where and when. So if anyone falls out last, it would be him. And so with that, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've got a $10 super chat from Rad Doctor, who says, if Google Russian IVF, there's total of 2,470, yet the losses equal 19,119, and how is this possible?
Well, it's an interesting question. They just simply have blown up that many. The Russians have loads and loads and loads of them in storage. And from what we understand, they've been pulling a lot of them out of storage because while the main battle tanks are very expensive to maintain and operate, the APCs really aren't. And so they've just been pulling them out of storage. We've been watching over the entire war over multiple supply yards where they just empty out. And that's where we're largely believing a lot of those losses came from, were refurbished APCs that were brought back into frontline service. And those aren't really like the main battle tanks where they start running out of tanks and you start seeing ancient like pieces coming out of the woodworks. They have thousands and thousands of these fairly modern APCs. The MTLBs are not that old, actually. They were in service and produced, I think, through the 70s and the 80s, so they're not that old, really about as old as anything else in the Russian army. The BMP 1s and 2s were produced in mass as well. And so in general, I think there's at least over 10,000 APCs just in the MTLB, the BMP-1s, and the BMP-2s. And that's not counting in every single variant of the BTR, and that's also not counting in every other variant of an armored car, which also gets counted into the armored personnel carrier or infantry fighting vehicle category in the loss report. So with all of that in mind, that's why, at least on the public records, there's only 2,000 or so APCs, but on the casualty records, there's over 19,000 at this point. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one here goes to Thomas Kruger, who puts in a 5 and says, the ICBM story has me nervous. I think they are flexing and showing capability.
It has me a little bit nervous, to be entirely honest. Not a lot. It's like a tinge. I wouldn't be that nervous about it because while they're trying to, flex their nuclear muscles, honestly, they've been doing this from time to time during the war for quite a while at this point. And so I'm kind of a little bit dull to the senses on this kind of a stuff, this kind of thing, because it just happens so much, and it's happened so much. It's just kind of, once again, another run at it, for the Russians at least. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to R.A. That Girl Chicago, who puts in a $5 donation. And thank you very much, R.A. That Girl for Chicago for the support. They said, I like the fact that you guys are out here putting out information and the truth, and there are too many people out here fear-mongering and promoting negativity. Thank you very much for that. I would agree with you on that. That's definitely a rampant thing in the YouTube community. There's people out there, literally, like we've said before, putting out stories about Morse code coming across the radio waves of the military and how the world's going to end literally tomorrow, the next day, and the next day after that, which is just silly. But thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
Let's see here. I want to just go. Let's see what kind of positivity we can get out there, Matthew. I'm just going to read off some random titles. Massive Russian losses. Eastern Front collapses. Well, that sounds positive. It was like positive on the first half. They had us in the first half, not gonna lie. Second half, just doomer. So let's go to another one here. Let's see what we get. That one's cringe. I'm not gonna lie, man. I just read one that's totally cringe. You want to hear what the intro to it is?
Hit me.
Breaking Bad news for Russia.
Yo, is that Walter White?
Jesse, we need to cook. It's like, bro, that title ain't cooking, though. Work on a new one. Let's see here. Hang on here. So let's go to this one. Let's see here. I'm trying to see. Oh, what? There's something on that one, Matthew, that begs. It's like, it looks like a typo. I don't know. I'll have to look back. I'm trying to see what titles we can find. But let's see here. Let's go look at this one. Dude, on the money. You know what I'm talking about here, man? Emergency alert. Russia plans ICBM strike on Kyiv. U.S. evacuates. And let's see.
I know who that is right now without even knowing it.
Let's see here. Oh, another one. This was 11 hours ago. Emergency alert. U.S. evacuates embassy in Ukraine. Russian doomsday plane airborne. 12 hours ago. Ukraine fires Storm Shadow missiles into Russia. 1 day ago. Emergency alert. Ukraine hits Russia with U.S. missiles. Wait a minute, hang on. Let me click on this one to get the full title here. Putin changes nuclear doctrine. Okay, so that one wasn't, like, that one's kind of close to what we did, so that was not that bad. Emergency alert. Every single one of them is an emergency alert, dude. They're happening like hour after hour. Emergency alert. Russia mass-producing fallout shelters. Oh, wait, hang on. What's the rest of this one? Well, damn, the title. Russia cuts cables in the Baltic. But the thing with it, is like it's not breaking news. It's emergency alert. Like, you got to get in the shelters now. It's like, let's see. Hang on here. Let's see. Red alert. This was 4 days ago, Matthew. Red alert. So we're now in Star Trek now. Red alert #1. And then it says Iran closes airspace. Iran tests another nuke.
Iran tested another nuke. When was that?
4 days ago, apparently, and I guess we just missed that one, and we also missed the one before it, because apparently they already tested one before that. So I thank you for enjoying the positivity that we have, because there are a lot of negative voices out there that are always like the doom and gloom, and also CNN really was like that today when we were watching it, because we got on there and they were like, now we're going to tell you what's going on in Ukraine, and they would go out there and they'd be like, it's a melancholy, dramatic place. The grey sky contrasts with the grey ground to give a really melancholic feeling to the entire war. People are begging for it to end, begging for them to be released from their suffering. We walked up to this man who had a 44 Magnum up to his, up to himself, and asked him how he was feeling, and this was his response. I'm just really tired of it. I just want it to end. Please, take me out. We then walked around the city some more and saw many other people in grieving. It's literally like North Korean propaganda, but like just on anything dealing with Ukraine. And I was like, this is the most melancholy and dramatic thing ever. And I was just absolutely taken aback by it. I was like, this is just ridiculous at this point. And there's no real substance to the news. They're not saying what's actually happening. It's all this emotionally charged stuff. And I'm just so sick and tired of emotionally charged stuff like that. Like, if you're going to be emotional, be positive. So many people are so negative these days that they just hate life, and there's no people out there that's giving them a reason to be happy about anything. It's like, be happy about something, look on the bright side of things, because it's easy to be negative about it. Be positive for once, But anyways, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And thank you so much for enjoying this channel, being positive and helping us to keep this thing running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, someone in the live chat here said that those people, like those folks that keep making the videos about the red alerts literally every single day, they've been making those videos for years, and that's like wild. The thing to me is obviously the guy making the videos is putting out crap, so that's like one zonk right there. But why do people keep falling for that over and over? Like, I don't understand how there's so many people falling for the same crap a day after day. The world can't be ending every single day. If it doesn't end one day and then it doesn't end the next day, and the guy keeps saying the same thing, you would think people would realize apparently the credibility is not very good here, and I should probably move on. But for some reason, people keep returning, which is kind of weird. But anyways, moving on here to our next super chat. This one goes to 2 hot dog guys, 1 cup of snow. Puts in a 5, and thank you very much for that support. They said LLT LSA Slava Ukraine, and what is the actual story behind the steam locomotive Best Friend and how it exploded in 1825? I only find conflicting reports.
I'm trying to think about that story. I don't know the specific story you're talking about. Let me go pull up the steam locomotive explosion, steam engine explosion, 1825. Let's see what we get. Steam engine, let's see, Best Friend of Charleston. It was the first locomotive to suffer a boiler explosion. And so let's see here. So it was using regular passenger service in Charleston. And let's see here. Let's see, he had grown. Let's see, hang on, hold up. So apparently this guy that was running the locomotive, called the Best Friend of Charleston, he got tired of the whistle, right? So this is according to the story. And this is just what I'm finding on Wikipedia, because I don't know the exact details of the story. I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And this is one of those stories that I don't know about. But according to what I'm seeing, he got tired of the whistle, so he closed the valve permanently. And also, let's see, he tried to overpressure the boiler. So let's see here. Hang on, I want to make sure I'm getting this correctly. So he put his fat ass on the safety valve, and so it exploded. Because there's no way for the overpressured steam to vent. So according to the story, it seems as though this man was so caked up that he sat on the safety valve and he just blew up the boiler. It appears to have also killed him, at least from what I'm seeing on this version of the story. So that is the best I can give for you at the moment, is that someone was so caked up they blew up a locomotive. No joke. And so with that, thank you so much. Let's give it the support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. In our next one here is going to go to Cody, who puts in a 5, and thank you very much, Cody. They said, any real reason for nukes to hit upstate New York? There was a Griffiths Air Force Base, but that closed down 20 plus years ago.
Nukes hitting upstate New York? I don't really think so. I think it's mostly it's not really populated. It's not going to be a real target. I would assume that it probably wouldn't get hit that much. Also, if you're like, should I be concerned? I mean, there's really no way to escape the concern, to be entirely honest, because if everything else is nuked in America, but where you're at, you lose every single modern amenity overnight. Whatever you have there is what you have to work with for decades at that point, and there will be really no return of consumer goods like the ones you have in your area, so it would get tough quickly as the years would pass. And also it would just be tough because of the flood of people who did survive the bombings, escaping the cities and going out into the countryside, and then you have to deal with that as well. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, but at least from what I know, I don't think it's an actual target of interest for a a Russian nuking. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on here to our next super chat, we have a $10 Canadian donation from Cheerful Tunic 40, and thank you very much, Cheerful Tunic, for the support. He said, "I just got let go from my first job. It really effing sucks." And also, I'm sorry to hear that, by the way. And he said, "The work you guys do is absolutely intense, and thank you. And having to see people get killed day after day, and does it ever get to you?" From Toronto. And first of all, I want to say this. I'm sorry you've been let go from your job. I've not gotten to experience that yet. I'm sure one day I will get to experience that. But then again, I'm only 24, so I haven't been let go of too many because I've only had a couple of jobs. So I'm very sorry to hear that, and I hope things do get better, and I hope you get back on your feet with a different job, because I'm sure there's plenty out there to get at this point. And also, by the way, they said the work you guys do is absolutely intense. It is a little bit intensive at times, around the clock pretty much, but it's something we enjoy doing. So not that bad when it comes to like trying to manage it, but it is quite a bit if you look at it from just a like objective standpoint. And does it ever get to you seeing the people get killed day after day? Honestly, for me, when I first started looking at it and doing it, it kind of got to me a little bit, just a tad. But then again, it's not the first time I've seen stuff like that, so it wasn't horribly traumatic. But over time, I think you get numb to it, like pretty much everybody does, and you start just sort of accepting it as a fact of life. That's what happens in war, and really horrific things happen. And over time, honestly, it's kind of a bad thing, actually. Over time, you sort of look at these atrocities, and it doesn't really have the same punch to it that it used to have, which is probably not a good thing whatsoever, but that's just kind of a nature of seeing it all the time. But it makes it, nonetheless, it's still horrible. But, Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd have to say thank you for the support as well. And also, I hate to hear that you were let go from your job. That's got to be rough, but hopefully you can find an even better paying job out there because of that. Maybe there's a silver lining to that after all. Who knows? But also, the work we do is sometimes intense. I'll be honest, I have not really felt anything watching people get obliterated about 200 days into the war, because at that point, especially at the beginning of the war, I would watch literally every single clip. Nowadays, I have my filter on Reddit to where it shows the NSFW stuff, and so I don't even look at it because, one, we can't put it on stream, and two, I've seen enough of it to know what it is, and so it doesn't really matter to me to see it or not. But seeing people get like quite literally, frankly, obliterated, it doesn't really bother me that much anymore, and that's because I've just seen it so much. At the beginning of the war, I used to be like, oh damn, that's pretty bad, and we'd still get on air and we'd joke about it, but after about 200 days or so of war, you just gotta get used to it. That was really the honest thing. Like, especially the really graphic stuff, you just look at it, and after enough of it, you're just like, oh, there's another one, and there's another one. It really desensitizes you to the value of well, not really the value of human life. Like, human life is quite clearly valuable, and I still understand its value. It really demines one's ability to respect the gravity of what you're looking at, because you've seen that so much that the gravity of it is kind of removed. It's kind of like saying, if everything is breaking news, nothing is breaking news. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, if everything is extremely graphic and gory, then nothing really is graphic and gory to you anymore, because you've seen it enough. And so that's kind of the best answer that I can give, is that it doesn't really bother us that much anymore. It just kind of is what it is, and we just look at it every single day, and then eventually compile news out of it. Not that I don't dwell on it every once in a while and think about it, but really that's just kind of like thinking back about some of the messed up stuff and be like, dang, that was pretty messed up. But it's nothing like traumatic where, like we're drinking ourselves to sleep or freaking out about it or having nightmares or anything. Like, well, actually I have had a few nightmares, but they're kind of few and far in between. And it's not really that big of a thing, because there's a lot going on and there's a war going on. So there's not really a lot of time to think about it that much, because we've still got loads to do and a lot to talk about, but still.
The ones that really get me really badly, I will admit, I don't have like nightmares all the the time from it. I'm not going to try to make myself out to be like a victim or something like that, because I chose to look at the footage just like the enforcer chose to look at it. But the one thing that has messed with me from time to time a little bit is when you see the footage of some of these guys getting chased by those FPV drones with the grenades attached to them, and you think, man, like the helplessness you must feel, like knowing there's really nowhere you can run to get cover. In reality, you're out in an open field and you're trying to like duck and run and dive and stuff like that, knowing the thing's about to get you. I'm like, geez, I'm like, if that ever happened, like for example, if World War broke out and we were suddenly drafted, because we're of draft age, then we might find ourselves on a battlefield somewhere with an FPV drone chasing us down with us nowhere to go. So, you know, when I see that, sometimes that does like make me think, that would be a really, really bad situation to be in if we were actually drafted and we had to go up against those drones. And everybody's going to use drones in the next World War. Like China has a humongous fleet of FPV drones ready to go, and pretty much everybody does at this point. So that would be a reality for pretty much any conflict that broke out around the world, and that's quite a hell of a situation.
I would say, let's see, if I had to talk about, I think this was like the most recent nightmare I had. It was like months ago, maybe like 2.5 months ago, 3 months ago. One time I had a nightmare that I was just there in Ukraine. Like the nightmare is that I was on a battlefield like Rabotny or Bakhmut or Avdiivka, and I was just sitting there. Kind of like we do, just spectating things, not involved in anything on any side of it, or, you know, even in jeopardy of being killed, just kind of observing things. And a Russian tank had been hit and had over-pressured. And, you know, and of course that's a pretty nasty thing when you actually see that up close. And we've never been able to show that on stream, but sometimes the video clips that I've seen, you get an up-close look of it. And while these people suffer in the overpressure and their organs are quite literally liquefied, sometimes they live for a little bit and then climb out the hatch. And so the nightmare is that like pretty much all of them just rolled down the front glacis, and well, I don't even think I can get into describing too much of the graphic details of it, but it was a pretty graphic nightmare, and the screams of the tank commander was just horrific because his organs had liquefied. And this doesn't make any anatomical sense. This wouldn't happen in real life. He would quite literally be dead at this point. But as he was screaming, his brains were like pouring out of his nose and his mouth, because that's what was happening. And all I could do in the nightmare, there wasn't anything I could do. I couldn't look away or run from it. You know, just kind of like we do on the show. You have to look at it. And I was just sitting there watching this guy scream until finally he just stopped, slumped over, and just died with everyone else who had rolled down the front glacis of that tank. It was a horrific nightmare. I remember I actually woke up from that one in a sweat. I was like, oh, that was rough. And then, you know, I went and got some water, went back to sleep, and, you know, just slept soundly until the next morning, got up, and then we went and ran the next show. So that's kind of like, you know, that's kind of like the normal nightmare that I get every once in a while from this thing. But it's not that bad because, you know, it's just a nightmare and it's not real life. It might interrupt my sleep here and there, but it's not that big of a thing. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, so we can get some nightmares here and there. And so thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Ghoul. We actually have 2 super chats from Ghoul, and they're each $5 donations. And thank you very much, Ghoul, for the support. He says, excuse me. They said, I love how you guys go into detail about stuff, and it seems like normal news just pretty much skims over most of the stuff. And I also saw that they're doing a 6-month follow-up air sampling mission, and it was posted 2 days ago on Newsweek.
Oh, okay, so it's a fairly normal thing. Okay, false alarm, everyone. The nuclear bombers are not flying. It's just fine. They're doing an air sampling test. Good thing. Good thing to know that they're just doing that for the next 6 months. But beyond that, I got to thank you for the support, and thank you for enjoying the deep analysis that we get on this channel, because we love to do it. I personally love to do it a lot because I always felt like that was lacking in the news. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also I saw Value Radar say, let's see, Value Radar said, man, that's a new fear unlocked about my nightmare thing. It was a lot more graphic than I'm even describing. Like way more graphic. I was really kind of like toning it down there to make it just acceptable to even say on stream. And even then, it's probably it is the stuff of nightmares, but it was even worse than that, because I didn't even describe what had happened to the other guys who fell down the front of glacis as a tank, and in some instances that was even worse, at least to me. But still, that it is what it is. You know, like look, we're having to watch this stuff. Like it's not like we are being forced to watch it. We volunteered to watch it. So, you know, if I ever have a nightmare over, I'm not gonna be like, oh, woe is me, you know, mental health, you know. It's like I subjected myself to this stuff. So, you know, it comes with the territory. I don't ever ask for sympathy on that. I honestly don't really want sympathy on that kind of a thing, because it's like, you know, it's just a story. You know, someone asked, do we have a tough time dealing with it? Being honest, not really. You know, every once in a while I get a nightmare on it, but that doesn't mean that I'm like, you know, like drinking myself to death back here or anything, or I actually don't drink at all. So I deal with this stuff sober. Like, it's just like if you ever wanted some inspiration to deal with horrors or anything, like nightmares or anything like that, I do it sober. So if I can do it sober, yeah, I'll be just fine. And so with that, I hope that does kind of address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one here goes to Adam McLean, who puts in a $10 donation once again, and thank you very much, Adam, for the second support of the night. He said, have either one of you ever seen a UFO? And I will say, for me personally, I've only seen one time, and it bothered the hell out of me. I saw an unidentified flying Oreo on the counter, and I was like, damn, that thing's got to go in the trash can. But no, but seriously speaking, though, I have never seen a UFO in person. Yeah, I've not seen one in person. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you for the support, Adam Clean. I've never seen one personally. I've always heard some people say that they've had a sighting story or something like that. Never personally seen them. Usually when I see lights in the sky, I think air traffic control stuff. I'm like, that's just some plane up there. It's nothing that major. And I've never seen planes or navigational lights moving erratically in the sky. So I've never seen a UFO, to answer your question, Adam McLean. But I think, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Simon Condon, who puts in a 5 and says, a 5 for the Cup of Snow Fund. Love that bit. And just love Ukraine and LSA.
And thank you so much for supporting this channel and allowing us to sit near the expensive advertisement for Dell computers and drink our coffee made of snow. And I gotta thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't have been able to make this thing possible for quite some time, as a matter of fact. And so thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, I see a live chat here from Scroogey. They said, isn't there a video of Ukrainian soldiers filming some UFOs from a tank? And yes, there is. And that's still actually unsolved. I don't think they ever figured out what those were, that they were filming from the tank, and it remains a mystery. But I will say this, folks. One thing, I tend not to believe into the alien theories out there. You know, with all the money going into black budgets for the U.S. Defense Department and things like that, I would tend to believe that maybe some of the stuff that we see on video sometimes is essentially basically the same thing as the SR-71 was back in the day. When it was flying around, people thought it was a UFO, and it wasn't. It was simply our newest aircraft. And I think that might be what some people catch on video sometimes. And also, I don't know if anyone else saw this, but yesterday in New Jersey, there was like a bunch of unidentified drones flying around with like multicolored lights on them, just flying around New Jersey. They were massive, and nobody even knows what they were either, which is very weird. But it's, you know, the thing about UFOs is you really can't tell what the thing is. Like, the footage is always so grainy, you can't figure out what the thing is. It's like, what happens to camera quality when UFOs come around? Like, all of a sudden, you can't tell what anything is. It's like film with a potato.
Yes, I would agree.
Maybe like that guy on CNN today. You're like, yes.
Well, you just kind of left the sentence hanging there. You're like, it's kind of like a potato. And I was like, is he still talking? Did the mic cut out? I was like, I didn't know.
And I was looking for some UFO input.
Well, you know, I never seen a UFO. I just don't personally believe in them, really. You know, aliens, UFOs. Oh, great heavens. Like, what does it matter even if they are real? You know, they've never bothered me. I mean, I've never been probed. I know Hot Dog Man has been probed, but not by an alien. But nevertheless.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. That's not an alien probe. Oh, man. There goes another 100, but beyond that, I do have to say, I just don't really believe in the aliens, the UFOs. That's so much going on the Earth as it is. It's like, why think of anything going on extraterrestrial? There's just so much to focus on and do here, or focus on just as people, more so than a whole other species of aliens out there. So I just don't believe in them. You know what I mean? You know, like, I just don't believe in them. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to, excuse me, Charlie H, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Charlie, for the support. And I do not see a comment left with this one, but thank you very much, Charlie, for the support, like I mentioned. Excuse me. And our next one here goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who also puts in a 2 and says, LSA, hit the like button. That's an order.
Oh, and thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment, the LSA Sergeant Figment of the LSA Sergeant Figment. And please do hit that like button. We are up to 3,800 likes at this point, and I think we might actually be able to get it up to 4,000, which would be really impressive for a live stream. And so with that, big thanks to you once again. Big thanks. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Nightmare Before Christmas, who puts in a 2 and says ICBM is the new V1. Putin won't care about money.
Maybe. That may actually be an interesting argument there. That would be backed up historically, at least. And so with that, I thank you for the support and sharing that idea, because that might actually be the case. Who knows? But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that quite well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Parabox, who puts in a 2 and says, does Ukraine know where are the nuclear depots at?
Everyone knows where the nuclear depots are at, technically. So yes, the Ukrainians would know as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Cody, who puts in a 2. And Cody, I think I might have duplicated the super chat actually, but Cody, if you did put in the second one, huge shout out for the other $2 support, and we appreciate it very much. And we also, goodness, have a 2 from Nasty Clark, and thank you very much, Nasty Clark, for the 2. He said, I doubt onions would nuke Tallinn, and hello.
And I thank you for the support, and I would greatly doubt it that they would nuke Tallinn in Estonia. It wouldn't be a nuclear target of strategic importance, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. The folks from Estonia may disagree with me. Maybe they would want the honor. But still, with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And hello there to you. And I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Tyler Morton, who puts in a 2 as well. And I don't see a comment attached to this one, but huge shout out to you, Tyler, for, well, once again, helping to keep the channel running and keeping the support running. So we appreciate that. And with that, we are now moving on from our Super Chat segment, because that is our last one. And we're moving into our live chats. And of course, first off, we got to get the Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J., Paul Schultz, David Millsaps for Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. They said the Morse code for tonight says, from the LSA Signal Corps, the citizens of the Republic will stand for what is right in the world. Long live the LSA, and just got home late.
And
welcome home.
That's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all for getting that correct again. Y'all have gotten that correct for 1,000. Well, actually, let me think. It's about like 920 days of the war, because we started doing that on day 80, I think. But y'all been getting that correct for pretty much the entirety of the war. And I got to give y'all a big congratulations, a great thanks for doing that, because y'all always let folks know what that Morse code message is. And so with that, it's time for us to move into, due to time constraints, the third to last question of the night.
All right, and the third to last question of the night is going to go to AF Kaplan. He said, do you have any further information from the Danish government regarding the captured Chinese ship?
Unfortunately, we do not at the moment. We were only able to hear that the Danish Navy has seized the Yopeng, and that is it. Beyond that, we have no additional information to work off of at the moment, and it probably will be published if at any time, maybe 2 to 3 days out from now. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the second to last question of the night. Hello? Hello?
Okay, I think I'm back now. But the next one here is going to go to Eric Horner, who says, hypothetically, do you think Ukraine can survive without the help of the U.S., with them just being backed by the Baltic states, and that's it?
Absolutely not. The Ukraine has made it very clear that they will die without American support. So I would have to say I would agree with Zelensky on that assessment, considering that he is the president of Ukraine, and he probably would not be incentivized to make a statement like that. I would believe that the Ukraine could not survive without American support, at least based off of the statements from Zelensky himself. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right. And that viewer is going to be Leora Abigail, who puts in this live chat and says, will the ICBM destroy Ukraine if it can't be intercepted?
The ICBM would not destroy Ukraine, especially if it's conventionally armed, and even if it did have a nuclear weapon on board, it would not destroy Ukraine, but it would greatly damage it. So the simple answer to that question is no. Even if it was nuclear armed, it would cause great damage, but it would not completely destroy Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I get to thank you all so much once again for watching. I don't know why we're running into major lag now, because we've been like lag free for the past 2 days, but I thank you all so much once again for watching, and if y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to comment. We love to see it. And of course, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Least Spring Army. The Least Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you once again for another great stream tonight. Almost 100,000 people have joined us by the end of the stream, which is a very big number for a live stream, and we were glad to have every single one of you. Also, almost 3,900 likes as well, which is getting close to almost a record here, and a huge shout out to all you for that. And of course, we will see you tomorrow night on the stream at 10 p.m. Eastern, as well as we will see you on the Short War video tomorrow, midday as well, if there's enough news to cover. But with that, Slava Ukraine, here on Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.